LoveLore Library. Chapter 90. The chance encounter with Su-won, in the eyes of Yen Yu many years later, was the greatest miracle in his life. Yen Yu, who was overly protected by his family since childhood, had always been an obedient and timid child. When the end of the world came, he watched helplessly as his family died one by one, and he himself survived under the protection of all his loved ones. At that time, he lived in despair, but he was also incomparably afraid of death. In S City, he only dared to come out at night, and on a certain night, he encountered a strange female zombie. That female zombie could not only communicate with him, she even gave him the zombie's crystal nucleus, letting him open his spirit-type ability in advance. Since that day, Yen Yu held a very excited and apprehensive mood as he waited for that female zombie at the same place at night. During this period, he had already smoothly used his ability to kill several low-level zombies and found their spirit source stone, which was also the crystal nucleus in other people's eyes. Just like this, a week passed and Yen Yu finally waited for that mutated female zombie again. Compared to a few days ago, she seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Her speed and movements were also much faster than when she left a week ago. In the boundless night, Su-won and Yen Yu silently looked at each other for a while. Hearing a burst of footsteps suddenly coming from not far away, Su-won immediately turned around and hid in the shadow of the corner. Yen Yu hesitated for a few steps and followed behind Su-won to hide. It was very clear that in this child's eyes, this female zombie in front of him was safer compared to those unknown people. The footsteps slowly approached and several figures quietly stopped at the place where Yen Yu was just hiding. "Boss, I don't see that child. Could it be that he didn't come today?" The one who spoke was a tall man who looked to be in his early 20s, and the person he called boss had a tall and sturdy figure with a baleful aura. Su-won recognized this person. He was called Yuan Hui. In the previous life, he was Chu Feiyang's right-hand man, and in this life, this person was Yang Zixi subordinate. Search carefully in the vicinity. If we still can't find him, we will squat here every day. We must find that child. Although Yuan Hui did not say it clearly, Su-won knew in her heart that the one they were looking for was Yen Yu. Very obviously, Yang Zixi, who can predict the future, also knows that Yen Yu is hiding in S City at this time. She sent people to find Yen Yu. Her purpose must be to pull him under her command. After all, in the end of the world, people who have mental abilities are few in number, and ability users like Yen Yu who have a natural variation of mental ability and can command tens of thousands of zombies is simply a rare and highly sought-after commodity. Watching as those people began to search all around and their figures got closer and closer, Yen Yu's body involuntarily began to tremble. At this time, he also realized that those people were looking for him. These days, he hid in the dilapidated building during the day and had already seen a lot of scenes of killing each other. Now that he realized that those strangers came for him, even if they didn't look so vicious, Yen Yu still felt that they were full of malice towards him. Feeling Yen Yu's trembling, Su-won gently raised her hand and pressed down on Yen Yu's shoulder. Although Su-won's hand was currently cyan and her nails were frighteningly sharp, her actions made Yen Yu immediately calm down. Yen Yu's spirit power was very high. He immediately felt Su-won's comfort and goodwill. Slightly turning his head, Yen Yu looked at Su-won with some gratitude. Su-won smiled, although she knew that her smile right now must look especially terrifying. Not caring whether Yen Yu understood her meaning or not, Su-won suddenly grabbed Yen Yu's arm and used a little strength to easily carry him on her shoulder. Then, Su-won gathered all the strength in her body and rushed out as fast as she could. Waiting to be found here, the outcome is a dead end. This four-person team won't do anything to Yen Yu, but they will definitely eliminate her in passing. Of course, this was still under the condition that Yen Yu didn't plead for her. If that child had a little bit of heart to plead for her and said that she was a conscious zombie, then Su Wan could imagine that she would definitely be caught in front of Yang Zishi. That ending would definitely be worse than death. So, the only thing she could do now was to escape and bring Yanyu along. If she could run out, then run. If she was caught, at least with Yanyu in her hands, those people would be afraid to shoot at the rat for fear of harming the innocent. "Captain, over there. It's that child." He was captured by a female zombie. The sharp-eyed team members saw Su Wan and Yanyu flying out at a glance. "Chase!" Yuan Hui waved his hand and the four people immediately chased after them. In the silent night, the streets were full of zombies. When Su Wan brought Yanyu to the city center, it was already occupied by a group of zombies. The fresh breath of a living person made them restless, but they seemed to feel that it was Su Wan's prey. They didn't act blindly without thinking, which allowed Su Wan to easily pass through the block. The four-person team behind her wasn't so lucky. They were surrounded by a group of low-level zombies. Although these zombies weren't very powerful, the highest ability that Yuan Hui and the others had right now was only level 2. It really took them a few minutes to clean up a large group of zombies. By the time they finished cleaning up those zombies and went to the streets to search, they only saw a broken body wearing Yanyu's worn-out school uniform. "It's still too late." Yuan Hui sighed, his complexion was particularly unsightly. "Captain, we also did our best. That child's fate wasn't good. Something happened to him at this time and we were also powerless. I believe that Miss Yang won't blame us after we return." Miss Yang. Thinking of Yang Zishi, Yuan Hui's gaze was somewhat complicated. Miss Yang once saved their brothers' lives and Yuan Hui willingly followed her. It's just that sometimes when Miss Yang became ruthless, it would make Yuan Hui feel uneasy from the bottom of his heart. Yuan Hui certainly didn't know that Yang Zishi was reborn with the system, and even more so didn't know that she was a 100% vicious supporting female character in her past life. There was a saying that it's easy to change rivers and mountains, but hard to change one's nature. Some people use revenge as an excuse to burn, kill, and loot, committing all kinds of crimes. This way, they would feel very happy. But hatred is a double-edged sword, especially when the person using this sword has an evil heart. Things will often move in the worst direction. It wasn't until the figures of Yuan Hui and the others had left for a long time that Su Wan brought Yanyu, who had changed into tattered clothes, out from the ruins of a building not far away. Yuan Hui and the others left. Su Wan didn't know what was waiting for them. According to Yang Zishi's character, once she became suspicious of these old acquaintances from her past life, then their end definitely wouldn't be too good. As the saying goes, I would rather betray the people of the world than let the people of the world betray me. Yang Zishi was such a person. She was reborn and had enough capital and strength. She, who could originally protect the Yang family, only brought out Yang Wu alone. That was because the Yang Wu of the past life was dead set on her and could even die for her. This kind of man, she didn't know how to cherish in her past life. In this life, she only felt at ease to bring him by her side because of Yang Wu's loyalty. Yang Zishi was an ambitious and proud woman. When she thought that she could control the world, she would look for the man who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her and then look down on the world together. Su Wan didn't know what kind of tasks were in her system, but she could imagine that after Yang Zishi completed the task of using cannon fodder to kill the original male and female lead, her next task should be to successfully counterattack. And to counterattack and become the female lead of a world, she still needed a matching male lead. And in this world, if there was one person who could match up to Yang Zishi, then it was only him, Dr. L. Ling Jing. Chapter 91. Perhaps it was because the appearance of Yuan Hui and the others made Yanyu feel a sense of crisis. In the end, he simply blindly followed behind Su Wan. Towards this little tale, Su Wan didn't refuse much. City's enemy-occupied area was filled with the lowest level of zombies. For the current Yenyu, it didn't pose any danger. Instead, the ones that could truly threaten him were those powerful ability users. A dilapidated city, a mess all over the ground. When Tsuruo once again set foot on the land of S City, it was very difficult to connect this place that was filled with countless zombies and the smell of decay with the glorious and modern city of the past. Leisurely strolling on the streets, the surrounding zombies seemed to feel the danger coming from him. Wherever Tsuruo passed, all the zombies subconsciously retreated. The air in the enemy-occupied area was rancid. Tsuruo frowned and took out a small and exquisite instrument from his bosom. The instrument kept flashing with a blue light, as if it was guiding the direction for him. A powerful ability user has appeared. In the western outskirts of the enemy-occupied area, Yenyu, who was already able to freely enter and exit a group of zombies, suddenly ran in front of Su Wan while panting, "Jijia, should we hide?" Jijia was what Su Wan made Yenyu call her. At the beginning, Yenyu followed her to this outskirts that was occupied by zombies. Because Su Wan was already the strongest among these zombies, the surrounding low-level zombies didn't try to covet Yenyu, this prey that belonged to Su Wan. And Yenyu settled down like this. Although there were very few supplies in the enemy-occupied area, there was still something for him to eat and drink alone. Recently, under Su Wan's guidance, Yenyu had already begun to learn to use his spiritual ability to communicate with the surrounding zombies. Today, when Yenyu was practicing his ability, he discovered the restlessness and uneasiness of those zombies. The atmosphere in the whole enemy-occupied area seemed to have become particularly depressed and gloomy today. Someone appeared, and that person was very powerful and also very dangerous. In fact, not only Yenyu, Su Wan herself also felt the strangeness in the air. Just hide, where can she hide? She was now working hard to upgrade from a level 2 zombie to level 3. Today was the most crucial time. Could it be that she was really unlucky this time? At this time, all the zombies in the western suburbs suddenly let out a burst of impatient screams. Those sounds were ear-piercing and violent. Su Wan's body stiffened, the air gradually filled with a pressure that made her heart palpitate. That person seemed to have the highest natural ability to suppress zombies. That person's aura was especially violent and cold. Who was it? Could it be? Su Wan suddenly thought of someone, Ling Jing. The father of zombies, Dr. L. If there was someone in this world who could suppress zombies to this extent without using any ability, then this person must be Dr. L. Why was he here? While Su Wan was puzzled, a slender figure had already passed through layers of zombies, leisurely strolling over. Indifferent, free and at ease, dressed in a neat black suit and pure white gloves. He came lightly, not even a speck of dust could be seen. The pressure that filled the sky made Yenyu's complexion pale and his chest felt stuffy. Yenyu widened his eyes and looked incredulously at the man who floated over. He had never seen such a powerful man before. Just the imposing manner that naturally exuded from his body could oppress him to such an unbearable state. From afar, Tsuruo saw Yenyu and naturally also saw the female zombie who had been standing by Yenyu's side. The two people, actually one human and one zombie, looked at each other from afar. Seeing Tsuruo, Su Wan was indeed surprised. Because this world was a task that headquarters assigned to their department. In theory, Tsuruo had no way of entering. However, not only did he come to this task world, but he also suddenly appeared in front of Su Wan. Right now, Tsuruo's eyes were filled with Su Wan's figure. His deep and serene pupils reflected her appearance. Although it wasn't a green-faced fanged beast, it was still very ugly. Su Wan subconsciously turned her face away. Your sister. Suddenly, she didn't want to see people. What should she do? Ah. Tsuruo caught a glimpse of Su Wan's movements and subconsciously smiled. What are you hiding for? It's not like I despise you. As he spoke, Su Rui already stood in front of Su Wan and Yen Yu. At this time, Yen Yu's expression was still very unsightly, but his trembling body seemed to have calmed down a bit. He doubtfully looked at Su Rui and then turned to ask Su Wan, "Jijie, you know him? Be good." Su Rui raised his hand, and his big hand, wearing a pure white glove, gently stroked Yen Yu's head. "You have to call me brother-in-law." Brother-in-law. Yen Yu blinked his eyes and looked at Su Wan with a face full of question marks. Original race. Different, can also fall in love. Little friend Yen Yu felt that the door to a new world had opened to him. Su Wan. Seeing that Su Wan still turned to the side and ignored him, Su Rui simply bent down and whispered a few words in Yen Yu's ear. Yen Yu nodded and immediately ran away at lightning speed. Seeing that Yen Yu had run far away, Su Rui took a step forward and suddenly opened his arms to hug Su Wan. Su Wan's body froze there, motionless. "No matter what you become, you're still my Xiao Wan." Su Rui whispered in a low voice and leaned his face on Su Wan's back. It's just that you suddenly became so tall. I don't seem to be used to it. Su Wan, though when I advance to level 4, I can restore my original appearance, okay?" Su Wan silently cursed in her heart and rolled her eyes. Su Rui on the side couldn't help but curl up his lips again. "Actually, it's also very good for you to be like this. In the future, you can protect me all. There's no need to rush to advance to level 4 and restore your human form. General Su, is it really good for you to casually use your spirit power to peep at other people's thoughts? Moreover, you don't need to restore your human form and whatnot. How heavy is your taste? Ah." Sure enough, hearing Su Rui's words, Su Wan suddenly turned around and looked straight into Su Rui's eyes. "You can communicate with me spiritually?" Su Rui nodded his head. "You should have guessed that my current identity is Dr. L. In this world, there's probably nothing I can't do." Su Wan, one must be modest. Ah. Doctor. Ignoring a certain person's arrogance, Su Wan continued to use her spirit power to communicate with Su Rui. "How did you enter this world? Do you also have a mission in this world?" Su Rui naturally still chased after Su Wan. Of course, because of the particularity of this world, he had to go through a lot of twists and turns before he successfully received the mission to enter. "I do have a mission. This time, it shouldn't conflict with yours." Su Rui couldn't help but laugh when he said this, because this world has been tampered with by an external system. The original female lead and male lead have been cannon fodder, and the direction of the world has also begun to become chaotic. Your department's mission is to eliminate the system carriers, and my mission here this time is to try my best to repair the law of this world that is on the verge of collapse. And, in short, is to save the world. Maintain the peace of the universe. Speaking up to here, Su Rui's eyes suddenly sparkled. "Xiao Wan, what do you think about turning this world into a zombie country?" Sure enough, what world destroyer boss, his method of saving the world is to destroy all of humanity and create a new race. Thinking about it, it's also great. Su Wan on the side couldn't help but nod. This idea is good, I also think so. Chapter 92. With the addition of Su Rui, this world-destroying big boss, Su Wan's idea of searching the entire S-city-occupied area was quickly realized. In this sweep, they harvested a number of crystal nuclei. Although they were the most common crystal nuclei, it was enough for Su Wan and Yen Yu to absorb and advance. The only thing that surprised Su Wan was that they didn't find Su Yen. Could it be that because of Yang Zixi rebirth, everyone's life trajectory has changed? Su Yen shouldn't be here anymore. Of course, you have to prepare for the worst. The plot that Su Rui received was more comprehensive than Su Wan. The plot of this world that Soo-won received was all centered around the original female lead. And the plot that Soo-rui received was more cruel and gloomy of this world. Since Yang Zishi could send people here to look for the uncorrupted Yan Yu, then it was very likely that she would also send people to kill Su Yan, who wasn't Yan Yu's Achilles heel. After all, Su Yan was Soo-won's younger sister and was destined not to be used by Yang Zishi. And for such a potential enemy, or if it was Soo-rui himself, he would definitely strike first to gain the upper hand. Since that's the case, we can only resign ourselves to fate. Let's also leave this place. After communicating with Soo-rui with her spirit power for a while, Soo-won decided to leave the S-City occupied area. There was no meaning for her to stay here anymore. It was already the 3rd month after the apocalypse, and level 3 ability users had begun to emerge among the humans. These powerful ability users had set up fortresses in some of the towns that were lucky enough to survive the apocalypse, and establish various shelters or survivor bases. The base closest to S-City was called Kanjia Base and was founded by the Kanjia Squad. At the beginning of the end of the world, this was also considered a very large base. Unfortunately, as time went on, more and more ability users advanced and the zombies also began to upgrade and mutate. Kanjia Base gradually began to decline. Finally, the leader of Kanjia Base was killed by a level 6 mutated zombie during the process of collecting supplies. The ability user squads in the entire base either left or scattered. In the end, only a few old, weak, sick and disabled people were left in the entire base. Their fate could be imagined. Because she knew the fate of Kanjia Base, Yang Zishi didn't choose to stay in Kanjia Base with her own people. She chose Longshang Base, which was closest to Beast City. That place was easy to defend and hard to attack. Furthermore, it was close to the military fortress Beast City. In between Longshang Base and Beast City, there was a secret military base. There was a large amount of military supplies and firearms stored there. After getting the detailed information about the military base from the system, Yang Zishi had already started to have ideas about that batch of military supplies. But before that, she had to gain a firm foothold in the Flying Dragon Special Forces base. She might even be able to cover up everything with one hand, and contrary to Yang Zishi, Soo-won chose Kanjia Base. At present, she still doesn't want to expose herself too quickly. Moreover, Kanjia Base is far away from the 4 major human bases and also far away from the human army. It is currently the most suitable place for them to plan. 3 days later, outside Kanjia Base. Li Tao was a water ability user. He brought his wife and children all the way from S-City's enemy-occupied area. After several twists and turns, they finally arrived outside Kanjia Base. At this time, Kanjia Base was a scene of prosperity. There was a long queue waiting for the inspection to enter the city outside the base's gate. Now, it was no longer like the beginning of the end of the world. Now, people were clearly divided into ranks. All ability users, especially those with excellent abilities, can get privileges no matter where they go. And those ordinary people who were not favored by the heavens, if they want to enter the survivor base, they have to go through very strict screening and inspection. They also have to pay a certain amount of supplies to be qualified to become a member of the base. And even if they enter the base, they are also the lowest level of existence. According to Li Tao's ability, it was a very precious water ability. Originally, he could directly display his ability and bring his family into the base. However, just yesterday, he encountered a large number of zombies in the process of hurrying along with his wife and children. Because of a moment of negligence, his 4-year-old son was scratched by a zombie. According to the known incubation period of the virus, after this child was scratched, there would be a virus incubation period of 48 hours. After that, he would be infected and turn into a zombie. Of course, there were also a very small number of people who not only relied on their willpower to resist the virus after being scratched, but also successfully stimulated their ability. But this was a very rare situation. Li Tao understood very well that his son, Li Xiang, was only 4 years old. How could he possibly resist such a powerful virus? Enchanting was clearly in front of him. Obviously, the extravagant hope of peace along the way, the hope of bringing peace to his family was in front of him. But that city gate was like a chasm that could never be crossed. Tao Ji. At the side, Li Tao's wife, Zhang Yimei, once again took a deep breath. She tightly hugged her unconscious son and revealed a faint smile towards Li Tao. Tao Ji, you go in. Don't worry about us. Just treat it as if the two of us are already dead. Mother and son were linked by heart. Zhang Yimei was reluctant to part with her son. She knew even more that she might not be able to possess an ability in this lifetime. She and her son had been her husband's burden since the beginning of the end of the world. Now that her son was in this kind of situation, she could not helplessly watch her son turn into a monster. Zhang Yimei had already thought it through. Once the incubation period passed, if he really turned into a zombie, she would kill him and then commit suicide. Yimei. What nonsense are you saying? When Li Tao heard his wife's words, he immediately interrupted her in a loud voice. I know what you're thinking. You. Don't even think about it. I won't abandon you. Even if we die, our family of 3 must die together. Hearing Li Tao's words, Zhang Yimei opened her mouth. In the end, she could only lower her head, look at the child in her arms, and silently cry. This kind of life and death choice would be played out in every corner of the end of the world every day. Some people abandon their wives and daughters, abandon their loved ones in order to live, and some people would rather die than be separated from their family. In the 10 Good Karma Buddhist scripture, it was said, life for oneself, it's a matter of heaven and earth. Every man for himself, heaven and earth destroy. The for oneself mentioned here was actually a warning to all living beings that there is cause and effect in the world. In order to not eat evil karma, one must plant good karma and obtain good karma. In life, one must not do evil, or else one will suffer the consequences of one's own evil, and heaven and earth will not tolerate it. It was this kind of warning, but it gradually became the words that those who were blinded by greed often hung on their mouths. Perhaps this was human nature, and the arrival of the end of the world, the greatest evil and greed in the depths of people's hearts were gradually aroused. In the blink of an eye, it was already sunset. There was still a long queue outside Kanjia base. Li Tao slowly walked towards the woods outside the base with his wife and child. Li Xiang had already been infected with the virus for more than 24 hours. Right now, the child's face had already started to turn blue, and even slightly swollen. If this situation was seen by other people, it would definitely cause a disturbance. Maybe even those unreasonable people would unite everyone to attack the child. This kind of situation was absolutely not what Li Tao wanted to see. Just when Li Tao's family had just walked into the woods, a team of ability users came out from the woods. The leader of the team was a young and handsome guy. Although he was only wearing ordinary clothes, Li Tao could still see from his many years of experience that this person was definitely born in a wealthy family before the end of the world, and lived a superior life. Seeing Li Tao and his wife, that handsome young man slightly paused his footsteps. It's going to be dark soon, the woods are not safe. It's safer for you to stay with the others outside the city. Hearing the young man's kind reminder, Li Tao smiled gratefully. I know. And at this time, the eyes of the other person in the ability user team flashed. He quietly leaned against the handsome guy's ear and said a few words. That handsome guy's gaze slightly turned and directly fell on Zhang Yimei's bosom. Your child. Ah. Zhang Yimei was already guilty. When she was asked, she immediately panicked and retreated half a step. And at this time, Li Tao also prepared to fight at any time. Several other people in the team also noticed the problem at this time. Although the sky was a bit dark, there were still sharp-eyed people who saw the swollen face of the child in Zhang Yamei's bosom. It's an infected person. The team immediately burst into an uproar. Li Tao could clearly feel the emotions and hostility of these people. At this time, a petite figure suddenly poked her head out from behind the young captain. A tender and cute little face appeared. Is little brother sick? Brother-in-law, can you save him? The little girl looked at little Li Xiang in Zhang Yamei's bosom and her voice carried a strong unbearable tone. Su Yan, brother-in-law can't help them either. That's right, this young man in front of him was Chu Feiyang and the little girl next to him was Su Wan's younger sister, Su Yan. You guys. At this time, Chu Feiyang also seemed to see Li Tao's plan. He seemed to have thought of something and his eyes flashed with a touch of pain and struggle. Finally, Chu Feiyang still made a gesture. The people in the team muttered and finally followed Chu Feiyang to leave. Everyone looked at Li Tao as a fool, but at this time, in their eyes, this fool was no different from a dead person. Only little Su Yan turned her head back 3 steps to look at Li Tao's family somewhat reluctantly. The little girl seemed to want to help, but didn't know what to do. Finally, she withdrew her gaze and quickly followed Chu Feiyang's footsteps. Li Tao finally breathed a sigh of relief. The husband and wife continued to move forward. Perhaps it was because the forest had been cleared by Chu Feiyang's team once, so they did not encounter a single zombie along the way. Finding a relatively clean place, Li Tao made a fire, took out the tools he carried with him and used his water ability to boil a large pot of soup. This might be their family's last dinner. The husband and wife didn't speak and quietly drank the soup. Zhang Yamei held the child and leaned against Li Tao's side and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, the fire was about to burn out. Zhang Yamei suddenly woke up from her dream. As soon as she opened her eyes, she met her husband's red eyes. He was crying. Zhang Yamei panicked and immediately looked down at her child. At this time, little Li Xiang's original appearance could no longer be seen. His whole body was greenish-black, and his originally chubby little hands were now covered with long greenish-black nails. Zhang Yamei covered her mouth, trying hard not to cry. Li Tao, who was at the side, hardened his heart and finally took out the dagger from his bosom. His hands were trembling and his heart was bleeding. The sharp dagger, flashing a cold light, fell little by little and was about to pierce into the child's body. Zhang Yamei, who was at the side, tightly clenched her teeth and closed her eyes with tears streaming down her face. Good child, don't be afraid. Mother will soon come to accompany you. Just at this time, a rustling sound suddenly rang out. Li Tao's hand paused and he suddenly raised his head. Under the cold moonlight, a handsome little boy with a cold face stood not far away. Behind him were 2 zombies, a male and a female. This is Chapter 93. At the break of dawn, the gates of Kanjia base slowly opened. A group of ability user squads received their mission early and filed out from the side door. The people who waited outside the city all night looked at the people in the base in awe. Their eyes were filled with yearning and envy. Chu Feiyang's squad also received their mission and went out as usual. When they walked out of the door, Chu Feiyang's footsteps suddenly paused. He saw Li Tao's figure in the group of ability users queuing up to enter the city. Compared to yesterday, his mood today seemed to be a lot more stable. Could it be? Chu Feiyang's eyes narrowed. He noticed that Li Tao's wife and child were no longer by his side. On the contrary, there was an 8 or 9-year-old little boy standing behind Li Tao, seemingly wanting to enter the city with him. In this era, people who abandon their wives and children are no longer as hateful as they used to be. On the contrary, if they can be decisive and harden their heart to personally kill their infected loved ones, they will instead become heroes in people's hearts. Chu Feiyang retracted his gaze and no longer paid attention to Li Tao's movements. He wasn't in the mood to care about other people's business. At the same time, he also didn't have the qualifications to judge other people's rights and wrongs. Because he was also a person who once abandoned his true love. A coward. Turning around, he looked at Su Yan, who followed closely behind him. Chu Feiyang's heart felt slightly better. Su Wan, I've let you down, but you can rest assured. I will help you take good care of your only relative. This time, I will never abandon her. Chu Feiyang brought his people and quietly left. He didn't notice that Su Yan, who had been following behind him, deeply looked back at the place where Li Tao was standing when she left. Quietly standing behind Li Tao was a delicate and pretty boy. Although he lived in the precarious end of the world, that boy looked particularly clean and particularly calm. Su Yan still hasn't awakened her ability to control plants, but she was born with a strong affinity for all living creatures. Just a moment ago, she only glanced lightly and Su Yan felt a familiar aura from that boy's body. That aura was like the aura of her sister, but brother-in-law clearly said that sister was already dead. Su Yan turned around and followed behind Chu Feiyang. Her clear eyes stared at the back of the man in front of her, but her gaze suddenly became somewhat complicated. My name is Li Tao, 32 years old, level 2 water arcana. At this time, Li Tao had already arrived at the registration office at the city gate. After showing his water ability to the inspector, Li Tao smoothly received a number to enter the city. Yan Yu, who had been following behind Li Tao, did not expose his ability. Instead, Li Tao said that he was his nephew and he was treated as a family member of an ability user and smoothly entered Kanjia Base with Li Tao. 30 miles outside Kanjia Base, occupied area. Zhang Yamei's eyes were filled with tears as she watched her son running around in a group of zombies. Wherever he went, he left behind a string of ho 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 sounds. In the eyes of others, becoming a zombie was equivalent to losing everything, and couldn't even be called a person. But as a mother, Zhang Yamei would rather her son live like this. Moreover, he would not continue like this. One day, he would become like the other two zombies beside the young master. He would have his own consciousness and could even speak. At this time, a certain two zombies that were used as models were busy showing off their love. Su Rui, Xiao Wan, don't you think my current zombie makeup matches well with you? Su Wan, so ugly. Am I really that ugly? Su Rui, Xiao Wan is the most beautiful in my heart. Come, come, come. If you don't believe me, I'll kiss you. Just one kiss. Su Wan, die bang. A certain pitiful doctor was swung by a certain violent female zombie into a group of zombies not far away. Seeing Su Rui fall to the ground, because of the many messy disguises on his body, it caused him to toss and turn and climb up very laboriously. Seeing his embarrassed appearance for the first time, Su Wan couldn't help but laugh. Although she still had the appearance of a female zombie, when she laughed, her gaze was particularly gentle and clear. Catching a glimpse of Su Wan's smile, Su Rui simply lay on the ground and pretended to be dead. Then, he looked at Su Wan without blinking and put on a pitiful appearance of being bullied by his wife. Dr. L, where is your integrity? Seeing his face full of resentment, Su Wan couldn't help but take a few steps forward to Su Rui. She gently bent over and lifted her hand like she was lifting a chick, pulling the slender Su Rui up. Okay, stop playing. You go look at little Li Xiang. I'm going over there to absorb the crystal nucleus. Using her spirit to communicate a few words with Su Rui, Su Wan turned and walked towards the temporary residence not far away. This was the place where they temporarily settled down. It was located in the innermost part of the enemy-occupied area. Very few ability users would come here. Su Wan could absorb the crystal nucleus here with peace of mind. She was about to be promoted to a level 3 zombie. This was the most critical period. Whether or not she could successfully mutate depends on this time. Seeing that Su Wan went over to absorb the crystal nucleus, Su Rui had to reluctantly walk to the side and look at little Li Xiang from afar. Last night, Yan Yu fed little Li Xiang a bottle of medicine. That was the latest zombie virus developed by Su Rui in the laboratory. Once infected with this virus, humans would still turn into zombies, but they would retain some of the most basic human feelings and consciousness. So now, little Li Xiang was still wandering around like a child. Facing his mother, he also had a natural dependence, so he wouldn't hurt Zhang Yamei. In fact, according to Su Rui's idea, he wanted to directly let Zhang Yamei also inject the new virus, but that mother refused. She wasn't worried about her own safety. She was just worried that once she failed to resist the virus and became a zombie without consciousness, then she would no longer be able to see her child and would no longer be able to protect her child. This was the so-called maternal love, the greatest and truest affection in the world. Thank you. Seeing Su Rui standing by her side, Zhang Yamei couldn't help but say thanks again. Last night, their family of 3 should have died together, but the appearance of Su Rui and the others changed the fate of their family. Zhang Yamei was an honest ordinary person. She was like all ordinary people. In this life, she had never experienced any stormy winds and waves. This sudden arrival of the end of the world had almost made her heart collapse. And her son Li Xiang's infection was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Last night, Zhang Yamei really despaired. But in the last moment of despair, God gave her new hope. This is the latest medicine. It can allow infected people to have a high probability of maintaining human consciousness. Are you willing to be loyal to me and follow me to build a brand new world? People who have never truly despaired will never be able to empathize with that kind of encounter of being rescued from a hopeless situation. In the cruel end of the world, ordinary people were still the largest group and the weakest group. They struggled in the zombie horde and were regarded as a burden by the ability users. They had to use all means to abandon their dignity and pride. Sometimes, they even had to sell their soul and body. This kind of abandonment of everything in exchange for a chance to struggle at death's door in the end of the world. Zhang Yamei didn't understand. Why did the world become like this? Those ability users who were high above, weren't they also one of the ordinary people in the past? They kept saying that for the new world, for the future of humanity, how hard they worked, how they shed their blood, but did they ever really look back and see what kind of life those ordinary people who were trampled under their feet were living? In fact, whether it was ability users or mutated zombies, they were still human a long time ago. Then, no matter who ruled in the future, what difference would it make to ordinary people? Zhang Yamei sighed in her heart and looked at Su Rui full of gratitude and awe. In the future, can Xiao Xiang also speak like you? Zhang Yamei really didn't ask for much. She just wanted to hear her own child call her mother again. Su Rui glanced at Zhang Yamei indifferently. This woman in her early 30s, weathered the hardships of the end of the world. Now she no longer looked young, no longer beautiful, but this woman made Su Rui feel particularly sincere and warm. This was the so-called mother. Your son. Not only will he become like a normal person, in the future. He will also become very strong, strong enough to protect you, protect your family. Su Rui could see that Xiao Lixiang was a smart child and his age was the best age to learn all kinds of skills. At this time, Zhang Yamei still didn't know that Su Rui had already moved the idea of accepting Xiao Lixiang as a disciple. When she heard Su Rui's words, she only thought that he was comforting her. Until many years later, when her son stood at the highest point of the world, Zhang Yimei still couldn't forget that forest and the two zombie husband and wife who often showed affection in the forest. Someone once said that the end of the world was the most desperate and cruel world, but at the same time, it was also the most beautiful world. Chapter 94. The Howling Mountain Wind and the Dark Forest. Su Rui still wore the complicated and cumbersome zombie disguise. Right now, Zhang Yimei had already coaxed Xiao Lixiang to sleep. Su Rui had been quietly guarding by Su Wan's side. He could feel that Su Wan's spiritual power had reached a certain bottleneck. The abundant spiritual power was eager to break through but couldn't find that critical point. Tonight, she would advance. As for whether she would mutate, no one knew. Su Wan's body exuded a faint light green glimmer. Right now, her entire body was enveloped by the green light. Her originally tall body had now begun to change into a figure closer to that of a normal person. Vaguely, one could vaguely make out her once delicate silhouette. Su Rui quietly looked at Su Wan. As he looked, he suddenly deeply furrowed his brows. Su Wan's spiritual power was fluctuating greatly. The light on her body was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Through that layer of green light, Su Rui saw Su Wan's somewhat distorted face. "I've never loved you." In the garden full of stars, the man's voice was as gentle and pleasant as ever, but the words he said were piercing to the bone. Never loved. What a ridiculous confession. What was the gentle care and concern in the past? So what if they were affectionate in the past? Su Wan felt her voice trembling. Don't joke around." "I'm not joking." The man's calm gaze landed on Su Wan's face. "Xiao Wan, this is my and Qin Qing's wedding invitation. Come early on the wedding day." The wedding invitation was as red as blood. "The things that I can't get even after working so hard, others can always get them so easily. Why do you have to pull me out of the abyss of hell again and again, only to let me fall into eternal darkness the moment you turn around? I Su Wan that I won't forgive. Absolutely, unforgivable. If I can't get it, no one else can. Dream on, Xiao Wan. Xiao Wan. I'm Su Rui. Can you hear me?" The bright and beautiful firelight, the bright red color of blood, Su Wan vaguely heard a familiar call. So gentle, so intimate. It made her ice-cold heart slowly warm up again. Su Rui, Su Rui. Amidst the spreading flames, a slender figure slowly walked out of the flames. What greeted him was an incomparably scorching heat. "He is..." Su Wan suddenly opened her eyes. The cold wind howled in the dark mountains. Su Rui quietly stood in front of her, his gaze filled with anxiety and panic. The redness in Su Wan's eyes flickered and she opened her mouth. You succeeded." Su Rui looked at Su Wan. His heart that was hanging in the air finally fell to the ground. She had successfully advanced. Su Wan didn't seem very happy right now. She was a bit at a loss. Just as she advanced, she seemed to have returned to the past and saw that man again. Su Wan gently lowered her eyes. Thinking back to everything that had happened in the past, his heart didn't hurt as much as before. That man had always been a thorn in her heart, a hatred that she couldn't forget. But now, Su Wan suddenly felt that he wasn't as unforgettable as she had imagined. At the very least, she couldn't quite remember what he looked like. In the haste of time, the only thing that was remembered was the suffocating unwillingness that had been entangled in his heart all those years ago. Just like the vow of never forgive in the sky full of flames that year, this was the only bond between them. What's wrong? Seeing that Su Wan kept her eyes lowered and didn't speak, Su Rui couldn't help but take a step forward, wanting to touch Su Wan's shoulder. "I'm fine." Su Wan lifted her face and faintly smiled at Su Rui. Guess, what kind of ability did I mutate? N. Su Rui slightly muttered to himself. It can't be that it's the same as the original owner, right? It's not the healing ability, it's the illusion ability. It was similar to the spirit ability, but its main function was to use the weakness and dark side of people's hearts to create the most realistic scene. Illusion. Su Rui fixed his gaze on Su Wan. Xiao Wan, you really are the most powerful. Speaking of which, did you also enter the illusion when you just advanced? Did you see me? Did you? No. Under Su Rui's seemingly smiling yet not smiling gaze, Su Wan coldly turned her face. How could I have seen you? Impossible. Ha. Seeing that she was eager to explain, Su Rui's gaze flashed and he grinned as he rubbed against Su Wan's side. I guarded you for most of the night. I'm cold and sleepy. Let me lean against you and let me warm up for a while. I'm a zombie. Su Wan had no choice but to calmly state this fact: zombies don't have body temperature. Doctor, what about your intelligence that far exceeds that of an ordinary person? No matter how Su Wan put on a cold face, Su Rui still went his own way and leaned on Su Wan's shoulder, his hands tightly wrapped around her arm. Ever since he failed to be a black-bellied CEO in Fang Zimu's world, Su Rui relied on eldest young Master Situ's shameless and desperate attack of showing affection to test and lower the bottom line of Su Wan's heart. As the saying goes, a chaste woman is afraid of a pestering man. General Su felt that he had already found the knack of chasing after his wife, pestering her all the time, showing affection every minute and second. The so-called flaunting of affection and splitting up quickly is definitely not true love. General Su firmly believed that true love was shown. More than half of the night had already passed. Su Wan slightly tilted her head and what entered her eyes was Su Rui's face that had sunk into deep sleep. That originally handsome and extraordinary face had long been tossed around by himself until it was unrecognizable. But this kind of Su Rui made Su Wan feel at ease. Looking at that green and slightly sinister face, Su Wan couldn't help but chuckle in a low voice. Early in the morning, Su Wan was woken up by someone. She slightly opened her eyes and saw the little zombie, Li Xiang, squatting in front of her and using his long fingernails to reach into her pocket again and again. What was placed in the pocket was the crystal nucleus that Su Wan did not finish absorbing last night. You want it? Su Wan looked at Li Xiang's pitch-black eyes and asked in a low voice. He. Little Li Xiang nodded his head. What a clever little guy. Zhang Yamei on the side looked at the conversation between Su Wan and her son. She couldn't help but widen her eyes in surprise. You can speak. Very soon, your son will also speak again. Su Wan did not look at Zhang Yamei's surprised and excited face. She took out a piece of the lowest level crystal nucleus and shook it in front of little Li Xiang. Little guy, you know that this thing is a good thing, but can you absorb it? How to teach little Li Xiang to absorb the crystal nucleus is really a problem. Because he is too young and his consciousness is not perfect, Su Wan is currently unable to communicate with him. I can teach him. Su Rui, who was next to her, didn't know when he had already woken up. His gaze also fell on little Li Xiang's body, and this child's bones are amazing. He's a good material for practicing martial arts. By the way, saving the world and whatnot, it will all depend on him and little Yen Yu. General Su expressed that he was only responsible for showing affection. Little Li Xiang, master, you've really had enough. Yen Yu, cough. Actually, I think that this great task of saving the world can also be given to little Li Xiang alone. Su Yen, wait for me. Chapter 95. Longxiang Base, Central Villa Area, Villa Number 2. When Yang Wu walked into the villa, Yuan Hui and the others were sitting in the villa's hall with an ugly expression. "Brother Yuan, what's wrong?" Yang Wu looked at Yuan Hui with some doubts and asked softly. "No, nothing." Yuan Hui's eyes flashed, and it was obvious that he didn't want to say anything more to Yang Wu. But a young man on the side saw Yang Wu's figure and opened his mouth with some excitement. He seemed to want to say something, but because of Yuan Hui's eyes, the young man immediately lowered his head and shrank back. In fact, the entire Longxiang base knew that Yang Wu was Yang Zixi confidant. He always followed Yang Zixi orders. Seeing that Yuan Hui didn't want to say more, Yang Wu didn't intend to ask. He went to the second floor of the villa with ease. Yang Zixi's room was in the innermost part of the second floor. As usual, Yang Wu stood outside the door and knocked on the door respectfully. "Come in." Yang Zixi's somewhat low voice came from inside. Yang Wu pushed the door and entered. The people in the room saw his figure and were stunned for a moment. Then Yang Zixi's face showed a touch of joy. "Ah Wu, you're back." Yang Zixi, who had been reborn once and had the system by her side, felt that anyone she saw was suspicious. At present, the only person she could trust unconditionally was Yang Wu. "I'm back." Yang Wu took out a hand-drawn map from his arms. "This is the map I drew outside the Greenleaf Research Institute. The security there was particularly tight. I couldn't get too close. In addition, I didn't get any information about Dr. L there. You've worked hard." Yang Zixi smiled at Yang Wu, then frowned and looked at the map drawn by Yang Wu. The Greenleaf Research Institute was Dr. L's base. According to the system, Dr. L was a mad scientist who didn't understand the ways of the world. He rarely appeared in front of people. On weekdays, he spent all his time in the laboratory. It was such a madman who personally created the current end of the world. And his current mission was to attack Dr. L, the father of zombies. This is a scam. #Why does every female antagonist who has been reborn have such a deceptive system? I'm waiting online, it's urgent. As for how to attack Dr. L, the system did not give a clear route. The only hint for this mission was that whenever Dr. L appeared within 10 kilometers of the host, the system would automatically sound an alarm. What kind of ridiculous setting was this? Fortunately, the time limit for this mission was very long. It was a full 10 years. Yang Zixi was not particularly eager for success at this time. "Miss." Yang Wu interrupted Yang Zixi's thoughts. "Did Yuan Hui and the others make a mistake?" Although Yang Wu was not a particularly smart person, he had long felt that since the last time Yuan Hui's team went to S City to perform a secret mission, the young lady's attitude towards them had changed. Yang Zixi's eyes were slightly cold. At that time, she asked Yuan Hui to bring people to find Yan Yu because at that time, Yuan Hui was her most profitable assistant besides Yang Wu. Unfortunately, Yuan Hui let her down. Not only did he not bring Yan Yu back, but he also told her that Yan Yu was killed by zombies. However, the system clearly told Yang Zixi that Yan Yu was still alive and well. Sure enough, Yuan Hui and the others were not trustworthy. In the previous life, when they were under Chu Feiyang, they always looked down on her. She shouldn't have given them a chance. "Ah Wu, I only believe in you. Only you will never betray me." Yang Zixi faintly whispered, the expression on her face was complicated and inexplicable. "Forever." Yang Wu slightly lowered his eyes. He knew that her so-called forever was just to let him follow by her side forever and be a competent shadow. The forever here had nothing to do with love. In fact, Yang Wu understood Yang Zixi's attitude towards him. Whether it was her indifference towards him before the end of the world or her sudden trust in him after the end of the world, these all let Yang Wu clearly understand his position. Yang Zishi would not love him, never. But, he loved her. From a long time ago, he loved her, so even if he could only silently protect her like this, he would still gladly endure hardship. Right. Putting away his thoughts, Yang Wu saw that Yang Zishi was unwilling to talk more about Yuan Hui and the others, so he simply changed the topic. When I came back, I heard from the second team that something seemed to have happened over at Kanjia base. They sent people over to ask for help. The person who was sent over was our old acquaintance. Oh. When Yang Zishi heard Yang Wu's words, she slightly raised her eyebrows. In this end of the world, her acquaintances weren't too many. And to be called an old acquaintance by Yang Wu, Yang Zishi instantly thought of that one. Is it Chu Feiyang? It seems that he mingled well in Kanjia base. The Chu Feiyang of this life was still a dual attribute ability user. But without the healing Su Wand assisting him at the side, without the help of the group of good brothers in the previous life, could he still be able to laugh proudly and proudly? In fact, the person Yang Zishi hated the most should be Chu Feiyang, but she didn't kill him. In Yang Zishi's view, she wanted Chu Feiyang to live in pain for betraying his lover, to live without companions, to live alone. Then, she wanted him to watch with his own eyes, watch herself, the person who was abandoned by him, step by step, walk to the peak that he coveted but could never reach in his lifetime. Seeing the trace of hatred that flashed through Yang Zishi's eyes when she mentioned Chu Feiyang, Yang Wu silently stood at the side and didn't say anything. Chu Feiyang brought Su Yan to Longxiang this time. After he entered Longxiang base, he regretted it. Because Yang Zishi was too famous in Longxiang. The base's #1 healing ability user. Captain of the first team. It was said that she was also the sweetheart of Longxiang base's leader, Luo Xiang. Regarding Yang Zishi, Chu Feiyang's feelings were complicated. This woman made him hate her, but at the same time, he was also somewhat afraid. Chu Feiyang could still see it as long as he closed his eyes. Not long ago, Yang Zishi smiled coldly and pushed Su Wan into the group of zombies. At that moment, her eyes were filled with bone-deep crazy hatred. Chu Feiyang, you're just like this. That day, he hesitated for a moment. And the consequences of that 1 second of hesitation was not what he wanted to bear. Su Wan died and he could only escape in a sorry state, deceiving himself and others to live. This time, Kanjia base was suddenly besieged by a large group of zombies. Chu Feiyang was ordered by the base leader to come out and look for support. Before leaving, Chu Feiyang still subconsciously brought Su Yan along. In his view, Kanjia base could no longer be kept and he couldn't abandon Su Wan's younger sister again. He thought that he could let Su Yan settle down in Longxiang, but Chu Feiyang didn't expect that Yang Zishi and Yang Wu would be here and that their status was very high. This put Chu Feiyang in a dilemma. Su Yan followed Chu Feiyang and rushed all the way. After entering Longxiang base's reception area, she fell asleep peacefully. Su Yan kept frowning in her sleep, as if she was troubled by some bad dream. Until Chu Feiyang came in from the outside, Su Yan was immediately awakened. Did I disturb you? Chu Feiyang looked at Su Yan with some worry. No. Su Yan rubbed her eyes and found that Chu Feiyang's face was very bad. She couldn't help but ask, brother-in-law, is it that Longxiang's people aren't going to help us? Chu Feiyang sighed and slightly nodded. They won't do anything that doesn't benefit them, and we, Kanjia, really can't take out any bargaining chips to make them take the risk. Speaking up to here, Chu Feiyang quietly looked at Su Yan. Su Yan, let's leave tomorrow. Brother-in-law will take you to B City and we'll go and rely on Yanji. Yanji base was B City's military base and currently the largest survivors base. We're not going back to Kanjia. Su Yan stared blankly and looked at Chu Feiyang in astonishment. Then what about Shaolin Gij and the others? Or Uncle Tai, they're all waiting for us. Su Yan, Kanjia can't be saved. If we go back, we can only die. I can't. I can't abandon you again. I can't let you be in danger. Do you understand? Chu Feiyang's expression was very painful, but his gaze was very resolute. Can't. Abandon me again. Su Yan looked at Chu Feiyang's gaze slowly became cold. So, you plan to abandon Uncle Tai and the others? Just like how you abandoned my elder sister. Chapter 96. So, are you going to abandon Uncle Tai and them? Just like how you abandoned my elder sister. Su Yan's words were like thunder exploding in Chu Feiyang's mind. His face changed and his body subconsciously took a step back. Who told her? Could it be Yang Zixi or Yang Wu? Su Yan, I didn't. The matter is actually. Chu Feiyang wanted to explain something, but saw that the child in front of him already had a pale face and red eyes, so it's all true. Chu Feiyang, you really abandoned elder sister? How can you be like this? You still have the nerve to let me call you brother-in-law. I don't have a brother-in-law like you. You don't deserve to be my brother-in-law. I hate you. Chu Feiyang, don't think that I will be grateful to you just because you are good to me. I will avenge elder sister one day. As she spoke, Su Yan pushed Chu Feiyang away and quickly rushed out of the room. Su Yan. Chu Feiyang turned around and wanted to chase after her, but a tall and burly figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Yang Wu. Chu Feiyang recognized the person wearing the black ability user uniform at a glance. It was Yang Wu. Long time no see. Yang Wu softly spoke to Chu Feiyang, his tone low and his face indifferent. What do you want to do? Chu Feiyang saw that Su Yan's figure was about to disappear from his line of sight and couldn't help but become anxious. She's just a child. Don't tell me you really don't plan to let her go. Beat me and I'll let you go. While speaking, Yang Wu already attacked without hesitation. When Su Yan ran out of the room, her face was already full of tears. Sure enough, that night, she accidentally passed by Chu Feiyang's door and heard him talking in his sleep. That, Xiao Wan, I'm sorry. This made Su Yan's heart filled with doubts. At that time, she was not willing to believe it. She always felt that brother-in-law loved elder sister so much, how could he watch her die? But the cruel reality told her that in this world, other than her own relatives, she can't trust anyone. Dad, Mom, sister, I miss you so much. Su Yan walked aimlessly. She didn't know where she walked to. When she came back to her senses, she saw a young woman wearing a black uniform standing in front of her with a smile. Kanjia base. The night was deep. Outside of Tsangya land, a large and boundless horde of zombies was restlessly roaring loudly at the fortress of the base. This group of zombies suddenly gathered from 100 miles away more than 10 days ago. At the first moment, Kanjia base activated the highest alert defense. The entire base was in a state of panic. Although the base leader Lu Qin had already sent Chu Feiyang to ask for help at the first moment, Lu Qin was very clear in his heart that no one would help them at this time. Kanjia base was only one of the countless small bases in the end of the world. Although the people in their base didn't have to worry about food and clothing right now, compared to a real big base, their little supplies could simply be said to be insignificant. Originally, Lu Qin had already made up his mind to die. When he first built this base, he wanted to give the homeless people a stable place to live. Now that the zombies had surrounded the city, the worst that could happen was that he would die with everyone. But what everyone didn't expect was that after that large group of zombies came to the city, they didn't attack. They just surrounded Kanjia base and roared day and night, as if calling for something. In the base, Li Tao's complexion was very bad. Originally, he could secretly meet his wife and son outside every 2 days, but after they were surrounded by zombies, he hadn't gone out for more than 10 days. Creak, in the dark, the door was suddenly pushed open. Li Tao suddenly picked up the dagger by his side. Who is it? It's me. What answered him was a slightly childish child's voice. Young master. Li Tao's tone was full of surprise. Young master, do you have a way to get out of the city? Of course I have a way. Yan Yu's tone was very serious. He had already tried to use his spiritual power to communicate with these zombies these past few days. Originally, he thought that these zombies were the subordinates of a mutated high-level zombie, but the result of the spiritual communication showed that these zombies were deliberately driven here by someone, and the person who drove them seemed to want to find someone here. After determining that they didn't have any fatal danger, Yan Yu planned to take advantage of the night to go out and find Su Wan and the others to study these zombies. Half an hour later, Yan Yu and Li Tao had already left the base without anyone knowing. Under the interference of Yan Yu's spiritual power, those zombies wouldn't take the initiative to attack them. The two people smoothly shuttled through the zombie horde, but they had just walked a short distance when they were blocked by two figures. Spirit-type little demon. The young man wearing a white coat looked at Yan Yu with interest, his slender eyes slightly narrowed. Moen, capture him back and give him to the doctor for research, okay? The black-clothed man who was called Moen couldn't help but curl his lips. You should first find the doctor and then talk. I can feel the doctor's breath, he must be nearby. The white-clothed man's expression was very certain. And Li Tao, who was on the side, took advantage of the two people's careless conversation and was about to secretly activate his ability. The man called Moen suddenly pulled out a strangely shaped pistol from his waist. Don't move, otherwise, the one who will suffer will be you. Spiritual Power Pistol, Greenleaf Research Institute's product, specialized in restraining various abilities. This gun. Yan Yu pursed his lips and said with a cold expression, I know where the person you're looking for is. The two men looked at Yan Yu in surprise. That white-clothed man couldn't help but laugh. Little demon, you mustn't lie to people. Otherwise, Gidge, I will be very angry. Why would I lie to you? I also happen to be going to look for him. If you believe me, then you guys come with me. Okay, you lead the way. Moen put away his gun and looked at Yan Yu with a heavy gaze. Being looked at by him made Yan Yu somewhat flustered, but when he thought of his sister and brother-in-law, Yan Yu immediately felt full of confidence. The brother-in-law said, in this world, there is nothing to be afraid of. What has always been fearful and uneasy is only a person's own heart. Come with me. Yan Yu took a deep breath and brought Li Tao and the other two people to the place where Su Wan and the others were hiding. It was already late at night. Zhang Yamei and her son had already fallen asleep, and Su Rui and Su Wan had just rested. When Yan Yu brought the three of them and slowly walked over, Su Wan and Su Rui were immediately roused. Yan Yu came back. Su Wan glanced at Su Rui. He also brought guests. They came to look for you, right? In fact, Su Wan felt those two people after they appeared for the first time more than 10 days ago. But Su Rui said that she didn't need to pay attention to them, so Su Wan naturally let it take its course and treated them as if they didn't exist. At this time, Yan Yu had already walked outside the ruins where they were resting. Brother-in-law, are you there? There are two people who want to see you. Yan Yu didn't go in, but shouted loudly from outside instead. A certain two behind. What the hell is brother-in-law? Just when the two people were baffled, they saw a male and a female zombies slowly walking out of the ruins. This is. A familiar breath hit them in the face in an instant, making the two people dumbstruck in place. What's going on here? Why is this male zombie's breath so similar to my family's doctor? Cough cough. No, how could the doctor be a zombie? Even if the doctor really turned into a zombie, he would definitely be the most handsome zombie in the world. Isn't that so? So, what the hell is this ugly freak in front of them? Chi-e, I know you're ridiculing me. Su-rui suddenly opened his mouth, his voice as cold as ice. Bo, doctor. The man dressed in white fiercely swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared at Su-rui not far away. His tone was full of excitement. Doctor, you're really a doctor. Doctor, how did you become like this? Are you experiencing life? Doctor, don't tell me you're using your body to test the poison. Woo woo woo, doctor, you're really too great. Moeen, tell him to shut up. Su-rui coldly commanded again. Yes. Moeen, who was on the side, immediately wrapped a well-trained hand around Chi-e's neck and used his palm to firmly cover his mouth. Chi-e, woo woo. Woo woo. This world is finally quiet. Brother-in-law. Yan Yu, who finally caught the opportunity, immediately dashed to Su-wan and Su-rui's side. Brother-in-law, it's that one dressed in white, he's not a good person. Chi-e, woo woo. Woo woo. What crime did the Lewin family commit? Seeing that Su-rui didn't have any reaction, Yan Yu's gaze turned to look at Su-wan next to him. Jijie, you have to help me teach them a lesson. They just pointed a gun at Li Tao. Chi-e/Moeen, the female zombie and whatnot is actually your Jijie. 3 exclamation marks were unable to express the shock in the two people's hearts. In order to experience the life of a zombie, our family's doctor actually married a zombie wife. At this time, little Li Xiang, who was awakened by the movement outside, also staggered out of the ruins. Seeing the two unfamiliar and dangerous people, he subconsciously hid behind Su-wan and Su-rui, his 2 small hands firmly grasping their pants. Chi-e/Moeen, what's the matter with this little zombie? Don't tell us this is the doctor's son. But in just a few seconds, the 3 views of the 2 people have been refreshed again and again. Seeing the 2 people's lifeless and speechless expressions, Su-wan couldn't help but smile. She raised her hand and touched Yan Yu's head, whispering, "You're just a little mischievous person." They are your brother-in-law's subordinates. And they will also be your subordinates in the future. If you really want to teach them a lesson, then do it yourself in the future. Chi-e, this female zombie can actually talk. Wait a minute. She seemed to have said something incredible just now. She actually wants us to be that brat's subordinates. What kind of joke is this? The Lewin family is the elite of the elite. Moeen, when Moeen and Chi-e looked at Su-rui for help, they saw Su-rui turn his head towards Yan Yu and say with a smile, "Your Jijie is right, they will be under your command in the future." Moeen, Chi-e, doctor. Didn't you say that you will be our good boss for a lifetime? Su-rui, and Chi-e, alright, don't need a lifetime. Chapter 97. The eastern sky had just turned white when an earth-shattering roar woke up all the people of Kanjia base who were still asleep. Leader. Leader. The captain of the ability user team responsible for guarding the gate rushed in with a flustered expression. They're attacking the city. Those zombies have started attacking the city. Lu Qin, who had not rested well for several days in a row, had bloodshot eyes. When he heard his subordinates report, he didn't bother to change his clothes and immediately rushed out of the room, call the other teams to gather immediately. According to the tactics I have formulated, each team is responsible for guarding one direction. While speaking, Lu Qin had already activated his wind ability and quickly rushed to the top of the city gate tower. As far as the eye could see, there was a vast expanse of zombies below the city wall. Those zombies roared and rushed over in groups. Using their sharp teeth and nails, they constantly attacked the walls of the base. There were also some zombies level 2 and above that already possessed some special abilities. Their destructive power was even more astonishing. Lu Qin didn't have time to think too much and immediately released a large number of wind blades. Wherever the wind blades passed, a group of zombies would fall. At the same time, a large group of zombies would rush forward wave after wave. In the vast zombie army, Su Wan and Su Rui appeared very small. The two people stood in the middle of a group of zombies, looking at Kanjia base from afar. Lu Qin is a good leader. At least, he hasn't given up on the ordinary people in the base. Su Wan softly said a sentence. In the original plot, Lu Qin died in an accident not long after, and after his death, the entire Kanjia base fell apart and gradually declined. It can be seen that every good team needs a qualified leader. How long do you think he can last? Every ability user has a limited amount of mental power, and it is impossible for them to continuously use abilities. Su Rui's voice carried a trace of ridicule. Xiao Wan, if these zombies continuously attack the city for 3 days, at least, more than half of the ability users in the city will choose to abandon the city and leave. In the face of life and death, if you have a chance to live, then would you be willing to die like this? Without despair, there will be no miracle. Su Wan turned her head and looked at Su Rui. I'm a little hungry. Let's go find some crystal nuclei together. Okay. Thus, such a scene appeared in the zombie army. After groups of zombies were killed by the attacks of the paranormals, two figures would soon, casually, pass by and take away the core crystals of the dead zombies. Their actions were clean and neat, and very professional. The siege lasted for a whole day. When the sky turned dark, the zombies were still tireless and even more excited to charge forward. The ability users who had been fighting for a whole day were already exhausted and miserable. Leader, if this goes on, we'll all die here. Why don't we retreat? Finally, someone took the initiative to suggest abandoning the city and retreating. Lu Qin hesitated for a moment. No, we can't retreat. He was not a saint, and he had never wanted to be a great hero who saved the world. However, Lu Qin knew that he still maintained the bottom line of being a human. When he first built the base, he did not accept ordinary people unconditionally. Those people paid a large amount of resources and made a great contribution to the construction of the base before they got the chance to settle down. Now, when danger came, as the leader of a base, how could he only care about his own escape and abandon these ordinary people who had already given up everything for survival? As a man with courage, Lu Qin asked himself if he could do this. If he escaped today, he wouldn't be able to sleep and eat in peace for the rest of his life. In the future, no one is allowed to mention such words again. Otherwise, you must be punished by military law. When the ability users on the side heard Lu Qin's words, some people finally felt relieved, while some people started to make small calculations in the bottom of their hearts. When the sky turned dark, Su Wan and Su Rui returned to the ruins where they had been staying. At this time, the originally barren ruins were cleaned and tidy. Yan Yu was using his spirit power to play with little Li Xiang while trying to communicate, while Li Tao and his wife were busy cooking dinner not far away. As for Mo Yin and Qi Yi, the two people turned the place where Su Wan and Su Rui originally rested into a small field laboratory. Looking at the brand new experimental platform, as well as those bottles and jars and a large pile of unknown reagents, Su Wan couldn't help but faintly look at Su Rui. Your men are all like this? Su Rui, should be about the same. Su Wan. Actually, I just want to know where I'm going to sleep tonight. On the experimental platform. Once the experimenter entered a state, the experimenter was very focused, so the two people didn't notice Su Wan and Su Rui's figure until Qi Yi poured an orange-red liquid into an experimental vessel at the side. Not far away, Su Rui frowned and subconsciously pulled Su Wan back 3 steps, then, with a bang, the experiment failed. The entire, temporary laboratory immediately became a mess. Chi-E and Mo-een looked at each other. The two people didn't have time to summarize their experience when they heard a cold and indifferent voice faintly ring in their ears. "You two, get out and run 30 laps for me. Immediately, immediately." "Yes, Doctor." Seeing the two people rush out like rabbits and then start running around the woods, Soo-won couldn't help but look at Soo-rue. "Your research institute's punishment method is to run? Life lies in movement." Soo-rue solemnly replied. In fact, there was indeed a special place for running in the research institute. It was a long circular single-log bridge, and under the bridge was a large group of piranhas. That's why running in the woods full of zombies and whatnot was simply too blissful. The next day, the zombie siege continued and the ability users in the city had gradually become scarce. There were a lot of ability users who had no worries and didn't want to die in battle. They had already taken advantage of the chaos to escape alone. Most of the remaining people were people who dragged their families down. Their loved ones were all here and they couldn't bear to leave alone. They could only bitterly support themselves in the city. By the third day, the city walls were already crumbling and the leader, who had been fighting continuously for 3 days, was finally unable to use his ability because of physical and mental exhaustion. The entire Kanjia base was filled with a sorrowful atmosphere of death. Everyone understood in their hearts that they wouldn't live past today. When the surrounding walls were breached, when the endless zombie army roared and rushed into the base, many people closed their eyes in hopelessness. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. Many years later, those who were fortunate enough to participate in and witness the defense of Kanjia base recalled the scene of that day and their eyes shone with starlight. A burst of clear and melodious music suddenly sounded in the deathly silent city. Immediately, those ability users who were preparing to fight to the death watched helplessly as those zombies all stopped moving and stood in place like statues. After a moment, the boundless zombie army automatically separated into 2 sides and several figures slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. When those figures gradually approached, someone in the crowd let out a low cry of astonishment. Some people already recognized that the youngster in the lead was Li Tao's nephew, Yan-yu, and following behind Yan-yu was Li Tao, who disappeared a few days ago. And following closely behind the 2 people were actually 2 zombies. In fact, Soo-won had recently successfully upgraded to level 4 and could already restore the original human form of the original owner. But according to the plan, she still maintained the form of a zombie. Since the headquarters classified this mission as a dangerous star mission, she must advance step by step. From the beginning, she planned to push Yan-yu out to be her spokesperson. Right now, she still couldn't let others discover her true identity. Once the news leaked out, it would definitely attract Yang Zishi's attention. Right now, Soo-won still couldn't completely figure out Yang Zishi's trump card and couldn't fight recklessly with her. Chapter 98. Kanjia base being captured. This kind of ending had long been expected by other bases. Even those bases that were very close to Kanjia base began to secretly prepare for the transfer of supplies. Once the zombie army attacked, they would immediately move collectively. However, when the latest news from Kanjia base spread to the surrounding bases, the little partners were all stunned. Kanjia base that had already been breached was actually saved by a little demon. And that legendary little demon that could fight against 10,000 was not only a naturally mutated spirit ability user, but he also had 2 high-level mutated zombie relatives that could talk. Do you need to be so ridiculous? Hearing this news, the leaders of the major bases all felt that they must have been too tired recently, so they had auditory hallucinations. And, well, even if it wasn't an auditory hallucination, they also didn't believe such an absurd thing. As a result, each major base sent their own spy teams to Kanjia base to investigate. And at this time, Longxiang Base also received the latest news about Kanjia Base. After knowing this news, Yang Zixi face slightly changed. She knew that Yan Yu was still alive. That naturally mutated spirit ability user must be Yan Yu without a doubt. After confirming Yan Yu's current position and identity, Yang Zixi immediately contacted her female supporting system in her mind. She wanted to know if Yan Yu was still a threat to her. Moreover, Yang Zixi also wanted to see if she could use Yan Yu as an entry point to trigger some side missions. The female supporting system gave Yang Zixi a chance to be reborn and also gave her opportunities and abilities that others could never reach in their lifetime. However, this system wasn't omnipotent. For example, every time you use the system item, you will spend a lot of points, and those points have to be accumulated through completing system missions. Speaking of system missions, it was even more abnormal. Once the system issued a main mission, the host couldn't refuse it at all. Moreover, the host must complete it within the specified time. Otherwise, the host will be erased by the system. No one was willing to be controlled by others in their life and death, and Yang Zixi, who was now bound by the system, had already died once. It was the system that gave her a chance to be reborn. She had no other choice, she must desperately obtain points and had no choice but to accept her fate and complete the various missions issued by the system. After connecting with the system, Yang Zixi asked about Yan Yu and sure enough, she triggered a side mission about Yan Yu. System, the host triggered the side mission, Yan Yu's happy life. The host has the right to refuse to accept this side mission. Once this mission is accepted, please become intimate friends with Yan Yu within the specified time and let him and his beloved have a family. Yang Zixi, Yan Yu is currently not even 10 years old, okay? What about my beloved? Didn't the last mission ask me to get rid of Su Yan? Yang Zixi unconsciously thought of Su Yan again. That day, because Su Yan followed Chu Feiyang into Longxiang Base, he triggered a side quest of cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The quest content was naturally to eliminate Su Yan. Yang Zixi accepted the mission, but when she saw Su Yan's face full of tears, she hesitated. In the end, Yang Zixi didn't do it herself. She just knocked Su Yan unconscious and threw him into the enemy's area outside the base. Not long after, she received the mission completion notification. According to the system, in the previous life, Su Yan and Yan Yu were a couple that couldn't be together, but in this life, the two people missed each other because of various reasons. Now that Su Yan is dead, Yan Yu also embarked on a completely different life path. Yang Zixi looked at the time limit of Yan Yu's task given by the system. It was 8 years. After 8 years, Yan Yu would also be 17 years old. Yang Zixi hesitated for a moment, but still accepted this side quest with rich points. She wasn't in a hurry to get to know Yan Yu. She first had to find a girl in Longxiang Base with a similar personality to Su Yan and nurture her by her side from a young age. Kanjia Base. Nowadays, there were 1,000 things waiting to be done in the base. The ability users who had overdrawn their combat power were all recuperating in the logistics department with peace of mind, and the civilians in the base were rebuilding their homes together with a group of powerful zombies under Li Tao's organization and command. Well, in the beginning, everyone was afraid and repulsed by those green-faced and fanged zombies. But after seeing Yan Yu command those zombies with their own eyes and witnessing the two mystical talking zombies by his side, everyone felt that zombies and whatnot, perhaps they weren't that scary. So, when the spies from other bases came to the outside of Kanjia Base, they saw a harmonious scene of a large group of people and a large wave of zombies building a city wall together. Everyone expressed, "It must be that the way I opened my eyes today is wrong." In the base, Su Wan and Su Rui wandered on the streets as if there was no one else around. Because Su Wan maintained the appearance of a level 3 zombie, her figure was now very similar to a normal person and her appearance wasn't as frightening as other zombies, so the two people didn't cause too much commotion wherever they went. On the streets, there would occasionally be some bold children poking their heads out and curiously looking at Su Wan and Su Rui. The two people unknowingly walked to the logistics department and came to the place where everyone was recuperating. Because there were a lot of injured people this time, and there was only one healing ability user in Kanjia base. Facing a large number of injured people, he couldn't handle it alone. Now, he could only rescue some seriously injured people first, and those who were lightly injured would receive the most basic treatment with the drugs stored in the base under the care of ordinary doctors and nurses. Dr. Wang, all the painkillers in the base have been used up. When Su Wan and Su Rui entered the door, they heard the nurse reporting to the doctor about the painkillers. In the end of the world, medicine was the most important material, and Kanjia base's foundation was shallow after all. Recently, the consumption was too big. Now, it was normal for all kinds of urgent medicine to be in short supply. Hearing the nurse's report, the middle-aged man called Dr. Wang frowned. What should we do? There are still several injured people who need surgery immediately. I originally planned to use painkillers to replace anesthetics. Now that there aren't even painkillers, do we really have to perform surgery directly? Although ability users had more powerful skills than ordinary people, their bodies were actually as fragile as ordinary people. Moreover, the remaining ability users in this battle were the relatives of the ordinary people in the base. They had stayed behind to resist to the death for the sake of their loved ones. Compared to the ability users who had fled, they were all heroes. They were all men with courage. Let me do it. An indifferent female voice sounded. Dr. Wang suddenly turned his head and saw two zombies standing behind him. Ah! The little nurse on the side was caught off guard and screamed. Then she reacted and nervously covered her mouth, looking at Su Wan and Su Rui in fear. Because Dr. Wang was older, his reaction was a lot calmer. The two zombies by Yan Yu's side that he called elder sister and brother-in-law, Dr. Wang also knew. Everyone even secretly studied the story of these two zombie husband and wife. In everyone's imagination, this was once a very loving couple. In order to save their younger brother in the end of the world, they were both infected. Then, they witnessed their elder sister and brother-in-law turn into zombies in order to save them. The younger brother was stimulated and his spiritual ability was stimulated. It was even a natural mutation. Under the dual connection of blood and spiritual power, these two zombies had been following Yan Yu to protect him. Slowly, they began to recover their independent thoughts as they continuously leveled up. Now, they were able to open their mouths and speak. It can be said that besides their appearance, the two of them were already no different from ordinary humans. That's why the imagination of the masses was very powerful. Dr. Wang looked at Su Wan. In fact, he didn't know how to address her. He couldn't be like Yan Yu and call her elder sister, right? You really have a way. I'm an illusionist. Su Wan took a step forward. Tell me which one needs surgery. I can create a real illusion for him so that he won't feel any pain. Really? That's really great. Without waiting for Dr. Wang to answer, the little nurse on the side already shouted excitedly. Dr. Wang. All right, you come with me. After that, Su Wan used her illusions to smoothly help the three injured ability users perform surgery. And under Dr. Wang's request, Su Wan also cast illusions on those ability users who were younger and suffering from the pain of their wounds, letting them rest in peace in the beautiful illusion. Coming out from the logistics department, Su Rui kept looking at Su Wan and kept smiling. What are you giggling about? Su Wan was baffled by Su Rui's smile. Nothing. Su Rui looked up at the gray sky above his head. Xiao Wan, look. The sky is so blue. Speak human words. Su Wan couldn't help but interrupt him. Where is the sky full of gray haze blue? Ah. Rui hesitated and grabbed Su Wan's arm. Actually, I just think that Xiao Wan, you're the best. You're always so kind and cute. Kind and whatnot, cute and whatnot. Su Wan lowered her eyes. They are also fighting with their lives for their family, for the things they cherish. I can only do this for them. Moreover, this was the best way to increase a favorable impression. Don't tell me you don't understand. In fact, both of them were well aware of the fact that they had personally directed this big show. Were they putting on an act now? Or is it fake compassion? Su Wan didn't struggle with this because in her self-definition, she was never a good person. As a bad person, she didn't need anyone's understanding and approval. Wait. You guys wait a moment. Just as the two of them were silent, an anxious female voice suddenly came from behind them. Su Wan hesitantly steadied herself and slowly turned around. She saw the little nurse beside Dr. Wang panting as she ran in front of her. I'm Ning Cici. I want to ask you to do me a favor. Can you help me? Ning Cici stared into Su Wan's eyes, her gaze filled with hope and pleading. Su Wan furrowed her brows. She wasn't a saint who would help anyone she saw. I don't have time. Saying this, she turned around to leave again. I'm begging you. Ning Cici's voice was a bit choked. I just want to see him again in the illusion. Just once is enough. It was my fault in the past. I had princess syndrome, I was willful. I only knew how to get angry at him. I despised him for not having a decent job and not having a wealthy background. It's my fault. It's all my fault. I had never thought about him seriously, and even because his parents were from the countryside, I often bossed them around. I really know I was wrong. I just want to see him again. He died for you, right? Do you want to repent to him or atone for your sins? Su Wan's action of turning around hesitated for a moment. Her lips slowly raised into a cold and indifferent arc, truly touching. You're not worthy of him using his own life to exchange for you, so, you'd better live in guilt for the rest of your life. As for meeting him again and apologizing to him personally, I won't give you that chance. Saying this, Su Wan coldly left. Su Rui's breathing also changed and then he quickly followed Su Wan's footsteps. Some people would always repent painfully after losing something. But what was the use? The dead couldn't hear it and the wounds you personally cut wouldn't have a chance to heal. Rather than living in the past forever and living in self-repentance, it was better to cut off everything. Or, be reborn like a phoenix and become a new person who knew how to cherish. Chapter 99. Although Su Wan rejected Ning Cici's request, the fact that she knew illusions quickly spread throughout Kanjia Base. From then on, there were people waiting outside Su Wan's room every day, asking her to cast illusions for them. Most of these people were ordinary people who had lost their loved ones. In such a desperate world, even if they knew that everything and everyone in the illusion was an illusion, they still yearned for it. Illusions had always penetrated the human heart and could see the darkness at the bottom of a person's heart. At the same time, it could also hit the softest and warmest part of the human heart. Su Wan did not reject everyone. She chose some people she felt could help and cast a small illusion for them, letting them reunite with their long-lost loved ones in their dreams. Just like this, Su Wan and Su Rui's existence became a very normal thing in Kanjia Base. Everyone no longer called them a zombie couple behind their backs, but called them Miss Yen and Mr. Su, according to the names Yen Yu said. After 3 months of repairs, the walls of Kanjia Base were finally rebuilt. And because of the last battle, Kanjia Base became famous in one battle. Now, many survivors in the vicinity began to desperately rush in the direction of Kanjia Base. At this time, Kangia Base welcomed two special guests outside. They claimed to be scientists. Because they were very interested in Yen Yu's spiritual ability, they voluntarily joined Kangia Base and wanted to develop a laboratory in Kangia Base to contribute to the great cause of the revival of humanity. Well, these two scientists were actually Chi-E and Mo-In. The two people, with a serious scholarly appearance, were welcomed into Kangia Base by Lu Qin with the most enthusiastic ceremony. If the leader knew that the scientists who were warmly received by him were the culprits who led a large number of zombies to Kangia Base, who knows how he would feel. Just like this, Kangia Base had another tightly guarded laboratory, and this laboratory was named Maple Leaf Laboratory. At first, the people in the base didn't know what Maple Leaf Laboratory was researching. Occasionally, everyone could only see some ability user squad sending live zombies into the laboratory. In addition, everyone also saw that Miss Yen and Mr. Su often went in and out of the laboratory. Moreover, every time they entered the laboratory, they would stay there for at least 3 days. Every time they came out, the two people's mental and physical states were not very good. So everyone guessed that the two of them should be assisting the scientists in the laboratory to conduct experiments with their own bodies. Just thinking about it made him feel that it was too great, sacrificing himself for others and whatnot. Everyone seemed to have forgotten the fact that two of them were actually not humans, but zombies. Just like this, Kangia Base flourished and the people in the base also lived a peaceful life. Until one day 3 years later, a group of foreign ability users brought a large group of people to the outside of Kangia Base, breaking the tranquility of the base. This group of outsiders were survivors who escaped from a small base that was attacked by zombies. A small portion of them were ability users, while the majority of them were ordinary people without abilities. Among these ordinary people, there were a few who had obvious wounds on their bodies. It was obvious that they had been infected by the zombie virus. They rushed all the way day and night just to come to Kangia Base. I'm Yukai. The leader of the group of outsiders was a level 4 lightning ability user called Yukai. In the current post-apocalyptic world, level 4 ability users were relatively common. Due to the high attack power of lightning ability users, they were very popular among the major bases. I know that your Kangia base has its own laboratory and capable people who can control zombies. I came specifically to ask for help from you. These infected people are the family members of our team. We don't want to watch them turn into zombies. I beg you to help us. As long as you are willing to help us, no matter what the result is, I, Yukai, and a group of brothers are willing to go through fire and water for Kangia Base for the rest of our lives. Yukai's request made the gatekeepers of Kangia Base feel very embarrassed because their leader, Lu Qin, was taking people out to do a mission and had not returned. And Yen Yu, who had the same status as Lu Qin in the base, was currently doing experiments with two scientists in the laboratory. More and more people gathered at the entrance of the base. Until Li Tao returned with his team members from a mission, the entire entrance to the base was blocked. Yukai and the others refused to leave, and those people who came from other places to seek shelter in Kangia Base were afraid of Yukai's strength and the unstable infected people around him. Both sides had been facing each other outside the base. After understanding the course of the matter, Li Tao hesitated for a moment and finally called people to enter the city to invite Su Wan and Su Rui out. Others didn't know Su Rui's identity, but Li Tao still knew a little. When Su Rui and Su Wan appeared at the city gate, it immediately caused a commotion. Everyone had long heard that there were two talking zombies living in Kangia Base. They didn't expect it to be true. And after Yukai saw their figures, he immediately became excited. Sure enough, running for his life all the way without stopping to choose to come to Kangia Base was definitely right. At this stage, except for Kangia Base, no other base could subdue zombies and get along with them peacefully. What's going on? Being stared at by everyone as if they were looking at a rare animal made Su Rui very unhappy. He slightly released his low pressure and coldly asked a question. The ice-cold tone and the pressure that made people's hearts tremble immediately made the surroundings quiet down. Even the level 3 ability user Yukai's complexion was pale, looking at Su Rui in horror. He's very strong. Among the surrounding people, only Li Tao, who was familiar with Su Rui's pressure, could still maintain the most basic calmness for the time being. Sir Su, the matter is like this. Li Tao narrated Yukai's matter to Su Rui. After listening, Su Rui was silent for a while. Just when everyone was waiting for his answer, Su Rui suddenly turned his head and looked at Su Wan with a gentle face. Wife, what do you think? Everyone outside the city, this scene isn't right. Everyone inside the city, that's right. It's this feeling. Our family Sir Su is actually a wife's slave, would we talk nonsense? At this time, everyone's line of sight turned to Su Wan again. Su Wan slowly took a step forward and stared closely at Yukai's eyes. Yukai only felt that the scene before his eyes began to spin. After a moment, Yukai still stood sluggishly in the same place, but Su Wan slowly nodded. You can accept them. All ability users wait for a unified arrangement. As for the infected people they brought, leave them to me. I will send them to the laboratory. Su Wan's voice made the sluggish Yukai return to his senses. Right now, his face was pale and his head was covered in cold sweat. Just now, he. Come in with us. Without giving Yukai a chance to react, Su Rui and Su Wan had already turned around and returned to the city. With the development of Kanjia Base, more and more people came to seek shelter, and among these people, there was no lack of people with ulterior motives. So every time a new ability user was accepted, especially a high-level ability user, Su Wan would quietly launch an illusion. Once the other party passed her illusion assessment, they could naturally successfully become a person of Kanjia Base. As for those who couldn't pass, sorry, Su Wan could only absorb their ability user's crystal nucleus. That thing was definitely a great tonic for zombies. As for treating human life as grass and whatnot, Su Wan expressed that she was just a zombie. She would never consider this kind of issue related to human nature and morality. That's right, zombies were so willful. With the departure of Yukai and the others, the outside of the city became lively again. 3 days later, Yukai and the others had been incorporated into a new ability user squad. Their infected relatives also came out of the laboratory for the first time. From the appearance of these infected people, other than their skin turning greenish-black and their nails and teeth sharper than ordinary people, they didn't look much different from ordinary people. Moreover, they still maintained their previous consciousness and thoughts. Kanjia Base's Maple Leaf Laboratory had successfully developed a drug to suppress the zombie virus. This drug could suppress the toxins in the infected people's bodies and let them maintain their human consciousness. Although it still couldn't completely resist the zombie virus, the success of this drug's development was undoubtedly a milestone in the end of the world. In less than 3 days, this news had already flown all over the country like it had grown wings. The latest drug. Chapter 100. In more than 3 years, Yang Zishi had successfully risen to the top of Longxiang Base and became the leader of this base. And just 2 months ago, she had already successfully obtained the firearms in the military base outside B City with Yang Wu and a group of confidants through the detailed information in the system. With these weapons, the ordinary people in Longxiang Base will also become the base's combat power. At this time, she also learned the latest news from Kanjia. Yang Zishi was surprised at first. Sure enough, after her rebirth, this world has changed too much. In the system's information, there was no Maple Leaf Laboratory in her previous life. And Kanjia base should have fallen apart because of Lu Qin's death at this time in her previous life. But now, Lu Qin is still alive and well, and Kanjia base not only developed very well, they even developed a zombie virus suppressant. This may be the so-called butterfly effect. Yang Zishi has dealt with people from the military before. She knows that those people are absolutely determined to get the newly researched drug. And now, all the forces are getting restless. A Kanjia base alone will not be their opponent. Now is the best time for her to make a move, to rope in Kanjia base and gain Yan Yu's favor and trust. That when the forces of the four sides are getting restless, the people of Kanjia base still live their peaceful and stable days. Because of Yan Yu, the zombies around the base rarely take the initiative to attack humans. The area of Kanjia base has expanded several times compared to 3 years ago. Now, people have their own fields and orchards. Under the care of plant and water ability users, fruit trees and vegetable fields are growing very well. The entire base achieved self-sufficiency in survival supplies a year ago. And in these 2 years, Lu Qin gradually began to retreat behind the scenes. Although he is still the leader of the entire base, in fact, all the affairs of the base were handed over to Yan Yu to take care of. Now, Yan Yu is almost 13 years old. Because of the rapid growth of his spiritual power and the tempering of a high position in these few years, he looks far more mature and steady than the average teenager. The entire Kanjia base is managed very well by Yan Yu, and Su Wan, who has long been upgraded to a level 6 zombie in 3 years, still maintains the appearance of a zombie. Well, this zombie appearance, she got used to looking at it. On the other hand, Su Rui had to accompany her and put on zombie makeup, which made Su Wan feel that it was quite difficult for him. However, our family's doctor seemed to be very happy about this. In order to prove that he was a zombie with a bright future, he had to change his appearance every year. Everyone in the base, this year, Mr. Su's new style is also great. Question: which zombie is the best at leading the zombie fashion trend? Kanjia's products, Sir Su is the strongest. Mr. Su. Today, while Su Rui was considering whether or not to change his hairstyle, Li Tao suddenly walked in with a hurried expression. Li Tao was now a rank 5 paranormal. Although he wasn't the strongest in the base, he was the one with the most authority in the base. Everyone knew that he was Yan Yu's elder, but very few people knew the real reason why Li Tao was respected by Yan Yu. What happened? Li Tao was considered a reliable person in Su Rui's heart. It was rare to see him so anxious right now. The people from Longyan base are here. In today's end of the world, there were 4 major bases. They were the first-ranked Yanji base, the second-ranked Longxiang base, the third-ranked Longyan base, and the fourth-ranked Lingtian base. Longyan was the closest place to Kanjia. At the same time, it was also the first big base that was destroyed by Yan Yu in his previous life. This group of guys came rather quickly. You should look for Yan Yu to deal with this matter. Su Rui glanced at Li Tao, his tone very indifferent. This doctor has always been responsible for showing affection, don't you understand? Fighting and killing and whatnot, I hate it the most. Young master, he's not here. Mentioning this matter, Li Tao's expression hesitated. It's young, He called young master away not long ago. The 2 people haven't returned yet. And Su Rui raised his eyes. Li Xiang had officially entered Su Rui's tutelage. These few years, while following Su Rui to cultivate, he also had to lead a group of zombies outside the base to fight. The little imp who was not yet 8 years old was already the little overlord among the tens of thousands of zombies outside the base. Speaking of which, Li Xiang was still young after all. It was normal for him to be a bit mischievous and playful. However, Yan knew that child's temperament was more or less tempered and would rarely mess around with little Li Xiang. Thinking of this, Su Rui couldn't help but turn his head to look at Su Wan. On weekdays, when she was idle, Su Wan would sit quietly in her room to absorb energy crystals. This kind of energy crystal was also the latest product of Maple Leaf Laboratory. Of course, it was still in the research stage. However, because Su Rui personally did the experiment, Mo-in and Chi-e were just assistants. Therefore, Su Wan was still very relieved to use this artificially synthesized energy crystal. The doctor's products must be the best. In fact, Su Wan also heard Li Tao's words. At this time, she felt Su Rui looking at her and Su Wan slowly opened her eyes. Now that she was a level 6 zombie, her spiritual power was very strong and she could communicate with the surrounding zombies from a distance. I found Li Xiang's position. Su Wan used her spiritual power to get in touch with Li Xiang. At this time, her expression was somewhat strange. I think it's better for us to go over. Okay. Su Rui stood up and quietly walked to Su Wan's side. He gently pulled her hand. Tell me their position. Immediately, Li Tao watched helplessly as a dark whirlpool appeared behind Su Rui. The two people's bodies were sucked into the whirlpool and then disappeared. The legendary space teleportation. Li Tao couldn't help but think of the words that his son always said, "My master is very powerful. He's the most powerful in the whole world." In fact, all these years, Li Tao didn't see Su Rui make any moves or kill anyone. However, he still vaguely felt that this mysterious Sir Su was very strong. In the end, how strong was he? No one knew the answer to this. At least, Li Tao couldn't say what kind of ability user this Sir Su had. 80 kilometers away from Kanjia base, a space whirlpool appeared out of thin air. Su Rui pulled Su Wan and the two walked out side by side. Master. Master's wife. Little Li Xiang was the first to rush over. Now that he was already a level 4 small zombie, he could already restore his human form. He looked no different from other 8 or 9-year-old children. What's going on? Su Rui always had a calm expression when facing Li Xiang. The so-called strict teacher produces a brilliant disciple. Our family's General Su was trained by a large group of insane iron-blooded instructors since he was young, so he has always been very strict with his disciples. Master's wife. Little Li Xiang's eyes turned, he raised his hand and grabbed the corner of Su Wan's clothes and then hid behind her. Master is a henpecked husband. Who in the entire base doesn't know this? Little Li Xiang raised his face and looked at Su Wan pitifully. Master's wife, it really has nothing to do with me. That female zombie is very powerful. Xiang, I couldn't beat her, so I looked for Yan Yu Gage for help. Who knew? Who knew? I know. Su Wan rubbed little Li Xiang's head. You didn't do anything wrong. You made a great contribution. Really? Little Li Xiang raised his head to look at Su Wan in surprise, but he saw Su Wan's gentle gaze looking at the female zombie who was fighting with Yan Yu not too far away. She was clearly only a level 3 zombie, but she had a very abnormal mutated plant ability. In this mountain forest, every tree, every stalk of grass was her weapon. Following Su Wan's gaze, Su Rui also saw Yan Yu and that female zombie not too far away. According to Yan Yu's current ability level and spirit power, dealing with such an enemy should be a piece of cake. But as it happened, he was entangled by the other party's vines. The other party didn't seem to want to hurt him, and Yan Yu also didn't use his spirit attack to ruthlessly deal with her. The two people clearly didn't know each other, but they had a strange feeling that they didn't want to hurt each other from the bottom of their hearts. It's Su Yan. Su Rui couldn't help but turn his head to look at Su Wan. Yes, Chapter 101. Su Wan didn't know why Su Yan also became a zombie, but fortunately, she was also a mutated zombie and she clearly still had human consciousness and thoughts. Su Yan. Su Wan subconsciously took a few steps forward and instantly arrived in front of Yan Yu and Su Yan. Looking at the female zombie in front of her who also had the appearance of a zombie, Su Yan's gaze flickered. She felt an incomparably intimate and familiar breath. She would never mistake this breath. This was her elder sister's breath. Jia. Elder sister. Su Yan struggled to open her mouth. She lived alone among the zombie horde for more than 3 years. Although she had long advanced, she had not spoken for a long time. She was very lonely and very irritable. She had been looking for something, but she couldn't remember what she was looking for. Until she met Yan Yu. His strange breath made Su Yan feel familiar, and Su Wan's appearance finally aroused Su Yan's long dusty memories. Elder sister, is it really you? Su Yan put away the branches that were wrapped around Yan Yu's body. She stared blankly at Su Wan, tears already floating in her eyes. It's me. Su Wan slowly changed into her human appearance in front of Su Yan. Seeing her elder sister's appearance, Su Yan finally couldn't help but throw herself over, hugged Su Wan and cried bitterly, "Elder sister, you're still alive. This is really great. I finally found you, I'm finally no longer alone." Whether it was a human or a zombie, as long as they have consciousness, they will feel lonely and will also be afraid of loneliness and solitude. Seeing Su Yan throw herself into Su Wan's arms and cry bitterly, Yan Yu stared blankly on the side. Obviously, this female zombie who was about the same age as him didn't look beautiful at all, but Yan Yu didn't hate her at all. Even when he tried to use his spiritual power to touch her sea of consciousness, her calm and strong affinity made Yan Yu's spiritual power involuntarily fluctuate. The feeling she gave him was too peaceful and intimate, just like a friend he had known for many years. Really touching, so she's Master's wife's younger sister. Little Li Xiang wiped his eyes on the side. In fact, he was secretly rejoicing. Fortunately, he was smart enough to see that he couldn't tangle with her, so he found someone to help. If he really killed her in a fit of anger, then wouldn't he become a sinner for all eternity? No, according to Master's character, maybe he would have become a dead person. And, to be precise, he was actually a zombie specimen. Ah. Little Li Xiang shuddered and decided not to think about this disturbing hypothesis anymore. In fact, Li Xiang could not understand his master's true feelings at all. Su Rui, hey, are you done hugging? I've never held him for so long before. Just don't overdo it. Don't think that I won't do anything to you just because you're a woman. Anyone who appeared by Su Wan's side and could distract her attention, whether it was a human or a zombie, male or female, was an existence that Su Rui could not tolerate. In short, it was enough to have him by their family Xiao Wan's side. General Su was worth 10,000, needless to say. Perhaps it was because Su Rui's gaze was too strange. Feeling his gaze, Su Yan, who always had good perception, immediately let go of Su Wan and then pulled Su Wan's hand, cautiously asking, "Sister, that person over there, he keeps looking at us. It feels so scary." Su Yan didn't know whether she should use human or a zombie to describe Su Rui because he gave her a very strange feeling. From the outside, he looked like the same kind as her, but she could feel the human aura on his body. And even if Su Rui didn't wildly and dazzlingly release his coercion, Su Yan still felt Su Rui's danger. He is. Su Wan paused, he's your brother-in-law. Even if they were regarded as husband and wife by the entire base, the two of them had been arranged to live together all these years. But in reality, the two of them only lived together normally, nothing more. At the beginning, Yan Yu kept calling brother-in-law, brother-in-law, that was also misled by Su Rui. These few years, he was used to calling him that and no one corrected him. Therefore, this was actually Su Wan's first time acknowledging Su Rui's identity, and it was also in front of this body's younger sister. Sure enough, hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui, who had been paying close attention to the two people, teleported in front of Su Yan. "Little sister, I'm Su Rui. You can call me brother-in-law. This is the first time we've met, please take care of me in the future." As he spoke, Su Rui also revealed an extremely sincere and charming smile to Su Yan. Brother-in-law's complexion changed so quickly. Little sister accepts incompetence. Ah. Su Yan stared blankly for a good while, her heart had been tangled. This kind of brother-in-law doesn't seem reliable at all, right? But she really felt that he was strong. Su Yan was still very confident in her perception. Moreover, he didn't despise her sister's zombie identity and whatnot. Thinking about it, he might also be a good man. Thus, Su Yan very happily acknowledged a certain person's existence. "Hello, brother-in-law. It's been hard on brother-in-law to take care of elder sister all these years." Elder sister, brother-in-law. At this time, Yan Yu, who had been ignored all this time, couldn't help but come forward again. He somewhat embarrassedly scratched his head and looked at Su Yan with clear eyes. "So you're Su Yan Mimi?" "My name is Yan Yu. I was adopted by elder sister and brother-in-law." Su Wan, what adoption, what's going on? How come she didn't know? There's also me. At this time, little Li Xiang also immediately jumped out to make his presence known. "Hello, little martial aunt. I'm Li Xiang. I was also adopted by master and master's wife." Su Wan, Li Tao and his wife have already cried themselves unconscious in the toilet, okay? Su Yan, it turns out that elder sister and brother-in-law are so compassionate. It seems that you really can't judge a book by its cover. This brother-in-law is really much more reliable than that selfish Chu Feiyang. There is a saying that birds of a feather flock together. Su Wan quietly pulled Su Rui's sleeves. "Have Yan Yu and little Li Xiang been going to the laboratory recently? I think they've all been infected by Qi Yi, that idiot." Su Rui. In fact, the person who stayed with Li Xiang and Yan Yu the longest was Su Rui, but Su Rui would not admit his stupid cute nature. It's still okay to be cute, but it's absolutely impossible to be stupid. Cough cough. Su Rui straightened his face and immediately said in a low voice, "Yan Yu, Longyan's people are coming over. They should be coming for the new type of medicine. You should go back and deal with them first." People from Longyan base. Yan Yu hadn't answered yet when Su Yan on the side couldn't help but ask, "Is it a team led by a fire ability user? You know them?" Su Wan turned her head and looked at Su Yan with some doubt. "More than just knowing them." Su Yan's gaze was somewhat fierce. "I met them on the road a few days ago and was almost caught by them to be an experimental subject. In the past few years, with the mutation and upgrade of zombies, all the major bases began to openly and secretly conduct research on zombies, but there hasn't been any progress. Nowadays, aside from the legendary Green Leaf Research Institute, there is only Kanjia's Maple Leaf Laboratory that can develop practical medicine. Sure enough, enemies won't meet. Ah." Su Wan lamented the arrangement of fate. In the previous life, Su Yan died in the hands of Longyan Base's people, and in the end, Longyan Base was personally destroyed by Yan Yu. Chapter 102. In the end, Yan Yu went back alone to deal with the envoy from Longyan Base. Of course, Su Rui and Su Wan wouldn't ask how he dealt with it because Longyan's people were doomed to not return. The people from the other bases outside all knew that Yan Yu was a mutated spirit type and could deter the zombies outside the base, making them not dare to approach Kanjia Base. And the people of Kanjia Base only felt that the zombies outside their base looked very pure and never took the initiative to attack humans. But they didn't know that the truth was that this group of zombies had long been controlled by someone. The one controlling them was naturally Su Wan, who stayed in the city all day and seemed to have nothing to do. Zombies were a new species that appeared after the end of the world. In fact, they needed to constantly evolve just like humans, survival of the fittest. Although Su Wan had been in the base for the past few years, she would occasionally go out with Su Rui. They brought little Li Xiang to level up in the zombie horde while subduing other mutated zombies near the base. Now, in other people's eyes, the large number of zombies in this area looked no different from a few years ago. In fact, the zombie army here were all high-level zombies with initial consciousness. And those zombies who were destined to be unable to recover their consciousness and could no longer become human had been obliterated by Su Wan and Su Rui. Their crystal nuclei were contributed to other people of the same kind who had the ability to level up. Now that Su Yan also came here, because she hadn't reached level 4 and couldn't transform into human form, Su Wan decided to let her stay outside the base with little Li Xiang for the time being because Su Yan's affinity was also very talented in controlling the zombie army. And they might start a war with Longyan soon. It was also time for this large zombie army to bare their fangs. The progress of the matter was similar to Su Wan's prediction. Long Yan's people ran into a soft rebuff here and left in anger. Shortly after they left, this team was besieged by a large group of zombies and in the end, they were gloriously annihilated. Long Yan's side quickly reacted. They strongly believed that this was a deliberate murder and the mastermind behind the scenes was naturally the people of Kanjia Base. While they strongly condemned Kanjia Base, they also firmly demanded that they hand over the murderer within 10 days. Otherwise, Longyan Base will implement military sanctions on Kanjia Base. When this news came out, the surrounding major bases began to secretly mobilize their troops. On the surface, everyone was watching from the sidelines, but in fact, they all wanted to be the fisherman who benefits from the fisherman. At this time, the people of Kanjia Base were very angry. In their view, the people of Long Yan had hypocritically sent people to snatch their potions. After being rejected, they had become angry out of humiliation and framed them. This was simply shameless to the extreme. Under the anger of the people in the base, the entire base entered a state of active preparation for war. You want to fight? Let's fight. Just when the smell of gunpowder was thick between the two bases, Long Xiang's people suddenly visited Kanjia Base under Yang Zishi's lead. Yang Zishi had already calculated this timing. When she brought Yang Wu and the others through the gates of Kanjia Base, the expression on Yang Zishi's face instantly changed. System prompt, discovered Dr. L's aura within 10 kilometers of the host. Dr. L, in his previous life, he was a particularly mysterious man. Apart from knowing that his name was Ling Jing and that he was 26 years old this year, all other personal information about Dr. L was blank in the system. Even the system did not know the true face of this mysterious Dr. L, and could only barely pinpoint the approximate area of his appearance by relying on his faintly discernible aura. Yang Zishi thought that she would have to wait a long time to get close to the Green Leaf Research Institute. She didn't expect to meet Dr. L here. Green Leaf Institute. Maple Leaf Laboratory. Yang Zishi's eyes suddenly brightened. Could it be that Dr. L is in Kanjia Base's Maple Leaf Laboratory right now? With this speculation in his heart, Yang Zishi increasingly felt that his idea was correct. It must be Dr. L, otherwise, how could there be a second genius who could develop the zombie virus? With such an unexpected joy, Yang Zishi and Yan Yu had a very cordial and harmonious friendly meeting. When Yang Zishi and Yan Yu met, Su Wan and Su Rui were sitting in the conference room next to them. The two people did not speak and just quietly sensed something. It has been almost 4 years since they entered this world. Although they have been paying attention to and collecting information about Yang Zishi, it was still the first time that they were in such close contact with the target. Until the people in the conference room next door dispersed. Su Wan recovered from her senses and deeply looked at Su Rui. Did you feel it? Su Rui nodded. In Yang Zixi Sea of Consciousness, there is a spiritual fluctuation that doesn't belong to her. It should be the system that resides in her mind. It's similar to artificial intelligence, but in fact, it should be regarded as a kind of parasitic spiritual body. I feel that its fluctuations are very large right now and its spiritual strength is slightly weaker than mine. However, if I rashly make a move, I'm not sure if I can destroy it in one go. I know. Su Wan nodded. According to the information we currently have in our hands, Yang Zixi has healing and space dual abilities, but in fact, she only has the healing opportunity that she snatched from the original female lead. The so-called space actually doesn't exist. The space she uses is her system space. This space can not only store materials and produce food, but it can even store living creatures. And once Yang Zixi herself encounters a life and death crisis, she will automatically be pulled into that space by the system. Therefore, we must not rashly make a move. Otherwise, we will inadvertently alert the snake and bring about endless disasters. System space. Spiritual lodging. Su Rui was silent for a moment. Xiao Wan, according to our mission prompt, this system is rejected by the laws of this world, and it resides in Yang Zixi Sea of Consciousness, forcing her to complete various tasks. These should be the basis for its recovery of spiritual power to fight against the laws of the world. I just noticed that the spiritual fluctuations of Yang Zixi and that system have been in a very excited state. I guess they must have some other task in Kanjia base this time. Hearing Su Rui's words, Su Wan's eyes suddenly brightened. You want to destroy her task? That's right. Su Rui nodded. The system in her sea of consciousness can't discover my spiritual power for the time being. I will always monitor their movements and find out the real purpose of their visit this time. Yang Zixi, who left the conference room, didn't know that she was already being monitored by Su Rui. She excitedly brought Yang Wu and another female ability user that she had carefully cultivated and toured the scenery of the entire Kanjia base together with Yan Yu's company. When they passed by the Maple Leaf Laboratory, Yang Zixi specially stopped for a few seconds. She probingly asked Yan Yu if she wanted to meet the legendary great scientist. Unfortunately, this idea was rejected by Yan Yu on the grounds that the other party was currently doing experiments. However, Yang Zixi was not discouraged. She found an opportunity and left with Yang Wu alone, leaving the female ability user who was about the same age as Yan Yu to stay behind alone. Although Yan Yu was young, he was very good at observing people's words and body language. Seeing the little girl's flushed face beside him and Yang Zixi nimble leaving figure, Yan Yu's complexion slightly sank. Beauty trap and whatnot, only she could think of it. After leaving Yan Yu's line of sight, Yang Zixi relaxed and brought Yang Wu to the outside of the Maple Leaf Laboratory. This was the most heavily guarded place in Kanjia base. At this time, they could only watch from afar. Miss, is it really alright to leave Lu Yu alone by Yan Yu's side? Yang Wu was still worried about Lu Yu's matter and did not notice Yang Zixi sparkling eyes staring at the laboratory. Lu Yu was that female plant ability user. She was found by Yang Zixi 2 years ago and carefully cultivated. Now, she was only 13 years old but was already a level 4 ability user. At first, Yang Wu did not know the real purpose of Yang Zixi's cultivation of Lu Yu. Until this time, on the way to Kanjia base, he accidentally heard Yang Zixi instructing Lu Yu. Yang Wu then knew that Yang Zixi carefully cultivated Lu Yu in order to give her to Yan Yu. This made Yang Wu's heart very uncomfortable. He didn't know when it started, but eldest Miss had already become so unscrupulous. In fact, she could already call the wind and summon the rain in Longxiang base. Moreover, Yang Wu also went to Yang Zixi's space. Her magical space had large fields and springs, just like a fairyland. For a moment, Yang Wu even imagined that they would be far away from the troubles of the end of the world, leave Longxiang base and find a place where no one would disturb them. Only he and Yang Zishi, the two of them. With his skills and her space, they could live a carefree life. At that time, the man would plow and the woman would weave. Their children would surround their knees. It must be a very happy and blissful appearance. But this was also Yang Wu's own extravagant hope. He watched with his own eyes as Yang Zishi changed from an ordinary person to the leader of the base who could call the wind and summon the rain. He followed all the way, unchanging in the wind and rain. Chapter 103. On the night he stayed in Kanjia Base, Yang Wu secretly sneaked into Kanjia Base's restricted area at night according to Yang Zishi's instructions, Maple Leaf Laboratory. This night exploration was smoother than Yang Wu imagined. He avoided a group of eyes and soon entered the central hall of the laboratory. The clean and tidy white hall, in addition to a large pile of experimental equipment, there was also a flashing red door at the side of the hall. Yang Wu stared at the door and his gaze began to become somewhat absent-minded. He felt that the door was calling him to open it. Open this door and he will get a different life. Ah! Dripping with sweat, Yang Wu sat up from the bed and realized that he was not in the Maple Leaf Laboratory, but in the guest house of Kanjia Base. He had a dream last night. The content of the dream was already somewhat fuzzy. Yang Wu just instinctively felt a little uneasy. He hurriedly got up and simply tidied up and left his room. In the early morning, the sun was shining. In Kanjia Base, people's busy figures and clean smiling faces could be seen everywhere. There were too many differences between here and Longxiang Base. Quietly looking at the people coming and going on the street, it was as if they were still living before the end of the world. Everyone was so satisfied and calm. There was no oppression and fighting in other bases, and there was no scheming between various teams. In other places, everyone could fight to the death for a crystal nucleus. But here, many crystal nuclei were casually thrown around by the children on the street as if they were toys. This does not mean that Kanjia Base has an excessive wealth of crystal nuclei. This only shows that in this place, everyone does not regard crystal nuclei and power as too important. Ordinary people and ability users get along very harmoniously. Even on this street, you will see a lot of infected zombies. They also live like ordinary people and did not receive any rejection or contempt. Isn't this the place I always hoped to live in? Yang Wu's gaze was somewhat absent-minded. When he returned to his senses, he noticed that the street had become very crowded and lively. And in the middle of a large group of people, there were two zombies, one male and one female. This should be the legendary Yan Yu's sister and brother-in-law, Miss Yan, Mr. Su. These two zombies were now very famous in the end of the world. Yang Wu could also see that the people of this base truly loved and cherished them. Humans and zombies can actually live together so harmoniously. This made Yang Wu feel somewhat incredulous. At this moment, a cold and sharp gaze pierced through the air. Yang Wu felt goosebumps all over his body. The feeling of being instantly seen through made his face pale. Who was it? Following that feeling, when Yang Wu looked back, he only saw the backs of the two zombies leaving. Was it them? Yang Wu could not help but frown. At this time, Su Rui, who was routinely showing affection on the street, was holding Su Wan's arm and whispering in her ear intimately, "There's already a flaw in Yang Wu's sea of consciousness. Your illusion technique yesterday has already taken effect." The spiritual attack just now was Su Rui's test of Yang Wu, and the result of the test made Su Rui particularly satisfied. Just yesterday, he had already used his heaven-defying spiritual power to secretly eavesdrop on the conversation between Yang Zishi and the system. After knowing the system's objective and mission objective, they decided to beat him at his own game and KO this foreign system in one go. Since Yang Wu's side is almost ready, the other plans can also be implemented. As she spoke, Su-won couldn't help but pause. The expression on her face was somewhat subtle. Are you sure that the matter of dealing with Yang Zishi should be handed over to Chi-e, and not Imo-in? I have already instructed Imo-in to return to Greenleaf Research Institute. In Su-rue's view, Greenleaf Research Institute no longer has the need to exist, and now with the existence of Maple Leaf Laboratory, he can just gradually whitewash everyone. And Su-rue suddenly smiled gently at Su-won. Don't you think that Chi-e is actually the best candidate to pretend to be Dr. L? Feeling good about himself, feeling that he has always been the elite of the elite and whatnot. Even if he is hypnotized, he reckons that he has always felt that he has always been awesome. On the second day after Yang Zishi arrived at Kanjia base, she announced an alliance with Kanjia as the leader of Longxiang. During this relatively sensitive period, Yang Zishi's decision undoubtedly pushed herself to the opposite side of the other alliances and made the people of Longyan base feel that they had lost face. Longxiang base was originally stronger than Longyan, but that referred to the overall strength of Longxiang. This time, Yang Zishi only brought a small team of ability users and dared to support Kanjia in such a high-profile manner. This was undoubtedly slapping Longyan's face. Longyan's leader, Qin Fei, was also a ruthless character. He knew that Longxiang was relatively far from here and had no time to send reinforcements. Under such circumstances, Qin Fei steeled his heart and directly mobilized all his forces to raid Kanjia base. He wanted to win by a surprise move like this. Taking advantage of the fact that Kanjia was unprepared, using the fastest speed and the smallest loss to break through Kanjia, and then directly detaining Yang Zishi in his hands. This way, not only could he keep Longxiang's people in check, but the people from other bases would also be afraid and not dare to act rashly. It has to be said that Qin Fei was also considered an ambitious and ruthless person. He was a person who did big things, and his actions were swift and fierce. Unfortunately, the one he faced this time was Kanjia. On the surface, Kanjia base's combat power could only be ranked in the middle among the major bases, but its actual combat power was frighteningly fierce. When the people of Longyan base set off, they were discovered by the zombie soldiers that were following them. So, without any accident, when they passed through the enemy-occupied area 100 miles away from Kanjia base, all the people of Longyan base were surrounded by the zombie army like dumplings. The endless zombies brandished all kinds of skills and continuously attacked. Before the people of Longyan could react, a large number of casualties had already appeared. In the end, under Qin Fei's command, Longyan lost more than half of its combat power. Only a small number of elite people were left and barely managed to break through the zombie horde. This time, Longyan base died before they could succeed, and the news of Kanjia base colluding with the zombie king to rebel against humanity also spread like wildfire. Facing the doubts of all parties, Yenyu represented Lu Qin and expressed Kanjia base's attitude: we want to create a new era of peaceful coexistence between humans and zombies. Whether it is zombies or infected people, they were also humans before and also our relatives. No one has the right to ruthlessly deprive them of the chance to survive. After making a righteous speech, Kanjia base issued an announcement to the whole world that they were willing to accept infected people and mutated zombies who had recovered their sanity from all over the country. As soon as this statement came out, the world immediately went into an uproar. Almost overnight, several other bases unified their pace and formed a crusade army headed by Yenji base. And because of the alliance between Longxiang and Kanjia, the leaderless Longxiang base had long been secretly controlled by Yenji's people who had long coveted their base's resources. This change came too suddenly. Yang Zishi couldn't rush back for a while, and for the sake of the system's mission, she couldn't abandon Yenyu, her ally, and couldn't leave Kanjia base. Fortunately, Yang Zishi, who always had the system by her side, didn't see Longxiang base as important. In her view, she had a powerful system, Yan Yu, this little boss, and Dr. L, this potential world-destroying boss. Even if the whole world was her enemy, she could still turn the clouds and rain with one turn of the hand. In this way, Yang Zishi and Yan Yu had already been labeled as in the eyes of the outside world. When various forces gathered and planned to attack Kanjia Base, the people of Kanjia Base were still the same as before. Regarding Yan Yu's world-shocking remarks, they felt that it was very normal and there was nothing wrong with it. And now, among the younger generation of Kanjia Base, some children had seen little Li Xiang's skills. In addition, they were confused by Su Rui's increasingly fashionable zombie appearance. There were actually many teenagers who ran to Lu Qin's office and scrambled to be a living experimental subject in Maple Leaf's laboratory. In their opinion, being able to switch back and forth between a human and a zombie was simply too cool. And now, every time those aunties in the base looked for a son-in-law, they would always talk about Mr. Su. It would be good if my son-in-law was half as powerful as Mr. Su. Also, my daughter must marry a person who loves his wife so much and is so infatuated like Mr. Su. As a result, Su Rui had imperceptibly set a benchmark for the young people of Kanjia Base. Want to marry a wife? Want to become stronger? Everything should be in line with Mr. Su. Therefore, the foolish young people felt that they had found a shortcut to the road to success. Chapter 104. The first battle between the bases after the end of the world finally started. Yan Ji and several other bases' ability users' allied forces mightily attacked Kanjia Base. And the entire Kanjia Base, in addition to ability users, also had a mutated army composed of a zombie army. After the two sides fought, the battle situation was very fierce. In order to reduce the casualties on their side, Su Rui and Su Wan also mixed in with the zombie army to participate in the battle. Originally, Su Yan had planned to attack level 4, but the war suddenly started. Su Yan had to temporarily give up his promotion and together with Li Xiang, commanded the zombie army to defend Kanjia Base. This was the first time that Kanjia Base's ability users fought side by side with their zombie allies. Because zombies were born with coarse skin and thicker flesh than ordinary people, they became the best shield for Kanjia Base's ability users. The cooperation of both sides greatly reduced the enemy's spirit in the first confrontation. But after a long time, the other side's ability users came up in batches. Because of the disadvantage in numbers on Kanjia Base's side, a large number of injuries quickly appeared. At this time, it was finally time for Yang Zishi to play a role. She was a level 6 healing system. Now, as long as Yang Zishi launched Healing Light, she could instantly heal more than 10 injuries. Although such a big move couldn't be used continuously, who was Yang Zishi? A strong woman with a space system. Seeing Yan Yu's side showing weakness, Yang Zishi hesitated and took out her space spring water. She mixed the space spring water with the healing effect with other medicines and gave it to the injured ability users. Although this also required a certain amount of system points to exchange, Yang Zishi felt that it was still worth it. At least after she tried her best to help, Yan Yu's gaze finally had a friendly temperature, and he also took the initiative to ask her to go with him to the laboratory to meet the legendary scientist. When Yang Zishi first saw Qi Yi, he was busy in the laboratory alone. White lab coat, short black hair, handsome and indifferent appearance. Everything looked similar to how she had imagined Dr. L to look. At this time, Qi Yi was concentrating on the experiment and did not notice the arrival of Yan Yu and Yang Zishi. When he finished the experiment and raised his head, only then did he notice Yan Yu's figure and the smiling Yang Zishi beside him. Leader Yang, this is Dr. Qi. Professor Qi, this is our ally, Chief Yang. Yan Yu formally introduced Yang Zishi's identity to Qi Yi. Chi-yi immediately remembered the task that Su Rui gave him. His face turned cold and imitated Su Rui's previous appearance in the laboratory. He carelessly made an N sound, then lowered his eyes again, assumed an aloof posture, and seriously looked at an experiment report on the table. At this moment, the three people's hearts were in a mess. Yang Zishi, Dr. L is really cold. Yenyuv, keep pretending, keep pretending. Chi-yi, Luen is indeed a genius at acting. Well, there's nothing in this world that can stump me. Cosplay and whatnot, it can't get any easier. After confirming the identity of Dr. L in the laboratory, in addition to treating the wounded every day, Yang Zishi had another task every day, which was to go to the laboratory at a fixed time every day to make his presence known. Yang Zishi, doctor, this is today's lunch. Chi-yi, yes. Yang Zishi, doctor, can I use this potion? Chi-yi, what? Yang Zishi, doctor, what do you want to eat today? Chi-yi, would it kill you to say one more word? Would it? Yang Zishi felt that it was very difficult to increase Dr. L's favorability. It was tiring and he didn't like it. And at this time, Chi-yi's heart was actually collapsing. To disguise a chatterbox as someone who cherishes words like gold, this was simply more stifling than running on a single plank bridge in the laboratory. On the 10th day of the battle, the Ability Alliance's army finally began to retreat in defeat. At this time, the ability users of Kanjia base led by Li Tao and Yang Wu naturally pursued the victory, but in the process of pursuing, they encountered an ambush by the other party. Fortunately, there was the timely rescue of the zombie army led by Su Yan. And in this arduous battle, Su Yan also broke through for the first time in battle and was promoted to level 4. Watching the female zombie in front of him gradually change into a delicate and pretty girl, Yang Wu's eyes couldn't hide the deep shock in them. Even though Su Yan had changed a lot from a few years ago, Yang Wu still recognized at a glance that this zombie girl in front of him was Su Wan's younger sister, Su Yan. At sunset, Li Tao and Yang Wu finally rushed back to Kanjia base with their injured companions, and Su Yan, who had recovered her human form, also followed them into the base. In the past, Su Yan lived in Kanjia base for a period of time. Now that a few years have passed in a flash, a lot of changes have taken place here. The people she was familiar with in the past also left and died. Now, only Xiao Lin Gij was still living in Kanjia base. Su Yan heard Li Tao mention him before. The hot-blooded youth who followed behind Chu Feiyang back then was now married and had children in the base, living a very happy life. When Su Yan went to visit her old friend, the injured Yang Wu did not follow everyone to the logistics department to heal his injuries. He walked alone on the quiet street, his gaze complicated and deep. Yang Wu. A crisp voice suddenly sounded in Yang Wu's ear. He abruptly raised his head and saw a familiar face, indifferently smiling at him. Su Wan. Yang Zishi knew that Yang Wu was already resting when he was injured. She quietly came to the outside of Yang Wu's room. The window of the room was open. From the open window, she could see Yang Wu sitting at the table helping himself bandage his wounds. Yang Zishi's gaze sank and she immediately pushed the door and walked in. Why didn't you tell me when you were injured? With a trace of displeasure in her tone, Yang Zishi forcefully grabbed the bandage in Yang Wu's hand and a healing light fell on Yang Wu's body. The wounds on his body immediately healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. They are all small injuries. I don't want you to consume your ability because of me. Yang Wu lowered his eyes and his tone was as low as usual. How can treating you be a waste? Yang Zishi blurted out with some dissatisfaction. She froze for a moment as soon as the words came out. When Yang Wu, who was sitting on the side, heard Yang Zishi's words, his expression slightly changed. Miss, I saw Su Yan today. Who are you talking about? Yang Zishi froze for a moment when she heard Yang Wu's words and asked in disbelief. Su Yan, Su Wan's younger sister. No, impossible. She's already dead, how could? It wasn't that Yang Zishi didn't trust Yang Wu, but didn't the system determine that Su Yan was already dead? She didn't die, she just turned into a zombie. Now, she's already a level 4 mutated zombie. Yang Wu stated in a low voice. How could the system make a mistake? Yang Zishi suddenly felt a stab of pain in her head because this was the first time she questioned the system. The system in her mind immediately began to attack Yang Zishi's sea of consciousness, giving her a warning and punishment. Miss, what's wrong? Seeing Yang Zishi suddenly holding her head with a pained expression, Yang Wu suddenly remembered that he met Su Wan last night and the words she told him. Is it the system? Did the system you're bound to do something to you? Yang Wu nervously held Yang Zishi in his arms and shouted at the air, I don't care what system you are, hurry up and get out of Mrs. Sea of Consciousness. Ding! Right at this time, the cold mechanical voice of the system suddenly sounded in Yang Zishi's mind again, hidden mission triggered. In order to ensure the safety of the system and the host, please erase the insider, Yang Wu. This mission must be completed and the time limit is 3 days. If the host is unable to complete the mission within the specified time, the host's soul will be erased. No, don't. Yang Zishi only felt the pain in her head getting more and more severe. In the blink of an eye, she fainted in Yang Wu's arms. At this time, Su Wan and Su Rui quietly stood side by side outside the door. As you guessed, that foreign system is very afraid of others knowing its identity. Right now, it has issued a mission to Yang Zishi to kill Yang Wu. Speaking to here, Su Rui paused and then lowered his voice. I just felt that the so-called system's spiritual body is a lot weaker than a few days ago. After punishing Yang Zishi today, it seems to have fallen into a dormant state. I reckon that it will restart in 3 days. At that time, if Yang Zishi completes the mission, she can naturally replenish its energy. If Yang Zishi is unwilling to kill Yang Wu, then this spiritual body won't have enough energy and there's nothing to worry about in the future. Hearing Su Rui's words, Su Wan was silent for a long time. That foreign self-proclaimed system's spiritual body needs to rely on a powerful soul to absorb the world's spiritual power. And the way it absorbs spiritual power is through issuing missions and letting the host complete the mission for it. When the mission is completed, it will absorb a certain amount of spiritual power from the world. Now, because the system knew that Su Yan was still alive, its spiritual power became unstable. And because of Yang Zishi's suspicions and Yang Wu's discovery, it overdrew its spiritual power and fell into a dormant state. Now was the best time to get rid of the system. Of course, if they want to kill the system now, they must kill the system host Yang Zishi together. Su Wan silently walked to Yang Wu's room step by step. Right now, she and Su Rui did not disguise themselves. Seeing the two people appear at the same time, Yang Wu subconsciously hugged the unconscious Yang Zishi in his arms. Get out of the way. I don't want to kill you. Su Wan's tone was very cold and her eyes did not have any human warmth. Ha! Yang Wu just smiled. In that dream, in my previous life, I already lost her once and also died once. As he spoke, Yang Wu gently raised his face and looked at Su Wan. I know you guys hid your strength. Of course, even if you didn't hide your strength, it doesn't matter. I won't resist. Kill me. In this life, at least I want to die together with her. Everything in his previous life, Yang Wu had already experienced it once in Su Wan's dream. In his previous life, Yang Wu, who lost Yang Zishi, forced himself to become stronger. He looked for opportunities to find Chu Feiyang again and again to take revenge. Unfortunately, as a supporting role, he never had the strength and luck to overthrow the protagonist that the Yang Zishi of this life, because of the appearance of the system, was like a completely different person. But Yang Wu couldn't give up on her, just like he couldn't not love her. Dying together, for him, might be the best ending. Then you guys will die together. Su Wan's voice was still as cold as ice. Her fingers suddenly grew 10 sharp as a knife and went straight for the hearts of the two people. When Yang Zishi woke up, it was already noon of the next day. She held her head that still hurt a little and suddenly remembered the task that the system left before she fainted yesterday: kill Yang Wu. No, I can't do that. Seeing Qi Yi's iceberg-like face gradually showing rich emotions, in fact, he was on the verge of collapse, on the night of the third day, Yang Zishi finally couldn't help but call out to Qi Yi before leaving, "Dr. Qi, I have something to say to you." "Qi Yi, haven't you said enough?" Despite his heart collapsing, on the surface, Qi Yi still looked at Yang Zishi with a paralyzed face and coldly spat out a word: "Speak." "I." Facing the man's emotionless eyes, Yang Zishi's lips moved. I like you." These 4 words were actually very easy to say, but after saying it, Yang Zishi felt that her heart was empty. In her previous life, she liked Chu Feiyang so much, but in the end, she died in Chu Feiyang's hands. Now, she said, "I like you" to the man in front of her, but in her heart, she was thinking about the life and death of another person. Oh. Hearing Yang Zishi's words, Qi Yi habitually answered with one word. After that, he stayed in place. Just now, Yang Zishi confessed to him. "Wait a moment, let the Luan family calm down." "You agreed?" Yang Zishi heard Qi Yi's answer and asked in disbelief. Qi Yi, on the other hand, was still in a daze. A certain mad scientist who had been a straight-A student since he was a child and had never been in a relationship felt that he was still very shy and nervous after being confessed to by a girl, although he knew it was not true. Should I calmly accept it? Or should I domineeringly refuse? How about silence is golden? If you don't speak, I'll take it as you agree. While Qi Yi was struggling, Yang Zishi had already made the final decision. Then she quickly left the laboratory. As she walked to her room, she used her spiritual force to contact the system in her sea of consciousness. The task of attacking Dr. L in the system was still in an incomplete state, which made Yang Zishi a little anxious. How could this be? Could it be that he didn't intend to accept me in his heart? Or something else went wrong? For example, I mistook someone else for someone else. Yang Zishi didn't dare to think about it anymore, because there was still 1 hour left before the time limit required by the system to obliterate Yang Wu. Yang Zishi, whose mind was in a mess, unknowingly walked to the door of Yang Wu's room. She had been busy conquering Dr. L for the past few days and had not seen Yang Wu for several days in a row. At this time, Yang Wu in the room looked scarred. Seeing him silently bandaging himself, Yang Zishi immediately rushed in angrily. "Yang Wu, what are you doing?" "Miss." When Yang Wu saw Yang Zishi's figure, he froze, but then he showed his usual calm and steady expression. "Eldest miss, what's the matter?" In fact, he knew that the time was up. 3 days ago, Su Wan's cold words were still lingering in Yang Wu's ears. "I'll give you one last chance. You still have 3 days left." 3 days' time was really short. Yang Wu wanted to see Yang Zishi more in the last time, but he didn't even see the corner of Yang Zishi's clothes these days. Yang Wu, who was already somewhat desperate, had to desperately fight on the battlefield. Perhaps, this was the only value of his life. The atmosphere in the room was very depressing. Yang Zishi and Yang Wu looked at each other. 2 people, one was waiting for the verdict of death, while the other was extremely anxious that the system, which had been silent for 3 days, just reacted again. the host failed to attack Dr. L. Perhaps it was because the system did not belong to this world, so apart from being able to capture Dr. L's aura, there was actually no way to distinguish the identity of the strongest person in this world, Dr. L, unless Yang Zishi really succeeded in attacking Dr. L. This way, because the original trajectory of this world was destroyed, it would gain a lot of spiritual power. This was also the criterion for the success of every mission that the system judged. Therefore, the system and whatnot was by no means omnipotent. Unsuccessful. These 3 words immediately made Yang Zishi's heart fall into an ice cave. System prompt: the mission to obliterate the insider Yang Wu has entered the countdown. If the host cannot complete the mission on time, his soul will be obliterated. 10, 9, 8. The cold mechanical countdown began to ruthlessly count down in Yang Zishi's mind. Yang Zishi stood in the same place, her hands trembling. 3, 2, 1. In the last 3 seconds, Yang Zishi's mind suddenly flashed a lot of fragments of her previous life. She saw the situation when she was about to die. She saw herself, who was just an ordinary person at that time, being ruthlessly thrown into a group of zombies. She saw Chu Feiyang ruthlessly leaving with Su Wan. Then she saw her body being ruthlessly and fiercely torn apart by the zombies. Right now, she was full of bitter hatred and could not feel any pain. At this time, she saw a familiar figure madly rushing over. That was Yang Wu. Yang Zishi unconsciously burst into tears. I'm sorry. Yang Wu, I'm sorry. I know. You love me. When the last second countdown ended, Yang Zishi smiled at Yang Wu while crying, "Ah Wu, I love you too. So, I won't hurt you. Even if I die, I won't." In this last second, Yang Zishi suddenly discovered that her rebirth was meaningless. She did not cherish the person that she should cherish the most, did not grasp the feelings that she should grasp the most, the so-called revenge, the so-called power. Everything was just an obsession. For those illusory things, she gave up the feelings that she could easily obtain. If there was no this so-called female supporting reversal system, if she was simply reborn, together with Yang Wu, living a stable life in the end of the world, that would also be a kind of happiness. So what if she was the female lead? So what if she's a female supporting? Everyone has the right to freely control their own life and not be like her right now, being controlled by an ice-cold machine to do some things against her will. The so-called system was originally a machine. How could it understand human feelings? Just as Yang Zishi was waiting in despair to be obliterated by the system, an ice-cold female voice suddenly rang in her ears. Concentrate your spiritual power and attack the system in your sea of consciousness. Yang Zishi, as long as you still have the conviction to live and the determination to be together with Yang Wu, you can defeat it. Defeat it. From now on, dominate your own life. Become the true protagonist of your own life. Yang Zishi already had no time to identify who the owner of the voice was. She began to concentrate her spiritual power. As a level 6 ability user, her spiritual power was very strong. Right at this time, Yang Wu on the side also abruptly clenched Yang Zishi's hand. Through his warm palm, there was a steady flow of spiritual power entering Yang Zishi's body. Su Wan and Su Ruix silently stood at the door of the room and watched as a grayish-white spiritual body was squeezed out of Yang Zishi's body. Su Ruix sneered and his overwhelming spiritual power enveloped the spiritual body in an instant. Before a certain system could finish its last words, it was already destroyed by Su Ruix's attack. A system that lost its host, sure enough, couldn't withstand a single blow. The moment that external system was destroyed, Su Wan's mind had already received the notification of the completion of the mission. The bug has been destroyed. The mission user can choose to leave the mission world at any time. This mission that seemed very difficult was actually completed so easily. This was something that Su Wan didn't even dare to think about when she just entered the mission world 4 years ago. If there was no Yang Wu, if Yang Zishi didn't choose to give up on the system, then based on their current strength, although Su Wan and Su Rui could win against Yang Zishi, once Yang Zishi hides in the system space and doesn't come out for 8 to 10 years, their mission will still fail. As the saying goes, the plans of the heavens are inferior to the plans of man. No matter how sophisticated the instrument is, it will never be able to calculate human feelings. In the end, Su Wan still chose to stay in the mission world. She still had 6 years. She wanted to use these 6 years to accompany Su Rui and complete his mission. Together, they watched the people who wandered from place to place in the end of the world live happily in the new era. In 6 years, Kanjia Base has become the largest base in the human world. With the arrival of the new era, the whole world no longer has those zombies that bite people everywhere. Now, all that is left are new humans. They all have their own consciousness and thoughts. Although they still can only rely on energy cores to absorb nutrients and energy, other than that, these new humans are no different from other humans. So much so that the number of new humans in the whole world is far greater than ordinary humans. Greenleaf Research Institute eventually disappeared in the long river of history. Not many people still remembered the Dr. L, who once made people pale at the mention of his name. In the New World, the publicly recognized #1 laboratory was called the Maple Leaf Laboratory. Walking on the streets of the New World's capital, you can see 2 statues side by side in the distance. That was a statue that belonged to Yan Yu and Li Xiang. They created a new era and also obtained their own love and new life. How does it feel to be an unknown hero? Su Wan and Su Rui slowly walked on the long street. At this time, the sky was blue and there were landscape trees that were as tall as a person growing on both sides of the street. 10 years after the end of the world, these common things in other worlds made people feel so precious and happy here. Unknown hero. No one knew that all the new drugs to suppress the virus, even the preparation to develop the human body's potential, the new energy cores and other high-tech things, were all from the hands of Dr. L. Dr. L. He will be written into the history books as a sinner of history. I have been to another end of the world before. Hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui subconsciously tightened his grip on her hand. There's killing and plundering everywhere. Xiao Wan, I've been very happy here for the past 10 years. I feel like I found something that I lost before. Every adult was once a child. And every child was once innocent and flawless. I also. Su Wan raised her head and smiled at Su Rui. I also found something that I once lost. It's very important, very important. Yang Wu took Yang Zishi to live a peaceful and secluded life that he wanted. In fact, after her rebirth, if Yang Zishi did not get the female supporting system, perhaps she would have already followed Yang Wu to live a peaceful life. The existence of the system aroused the desire and obsession in her heart, making her ignore the people around her. Fortunately, at the last moment, Yang Zishi was able to suddenly wake up. Regarding Yang Zishi, Su Wan did not hate her too much. Of course, in the end, if Yang Wu did not exist, Su Wan would never show mercy to Yang Zishi. It was Yang Wu's silent efforts in 2 lives that moved Su Wan. Just like Su Rui thought, Su Wan's heart had a soft spot and Yang Wu's infatuation was precisely what Su Wan had been looking for. It has to be said that, from another point of view, Yang Zishi was lucky and also incomparably happy. Compared with her, the Chu Fei Yang of this life was tragic. People, this kind of habitual creature, can abandon others for themselves once, abandon them a second time, then the 3rd and 4th time will become particularly easy. The increasingly selfish Chu Fei Yang was destined to live alone in this life, unwilling to give his heart to others. How could he expect others to be devoted to him? Su Wan felt that Yang Zishi and Chu Fei Yang were like a pair of rhombus mirrors, reflecting her past, present, and future. At the end of the world, let people learn to cherish. This world also let Su-won find back the confidence that she had lost. The 10-year time limit had already unknowingly approached. When the countdown ends, Su-won and Su-rue will be forced to leave this world. Feeling her soul being pulled out of her body, Su-won still looked at Su-rue with a gentle gaze. Su-rue, I will be in the next world. Waiting for you. I will wait for you. Chapter 105. When Su-won exited the mission world, Yi Axian went to the headquarters for a meeting and hadn't returned yet. Checking her newly obtained 50,000 points on the communicator, Su-won subconsciously adjusted the Lost Spaces mission list. In the past, she would stare at a certain name at the top of the shop in a daze. Today, she took a look as usual. Buried heart key. Disposable item, only used to open the buried heart box. A disposable item with a ridiculously high price. In the past, Su-won had always taken this kind of thing as her goal. Something as precious as the buried heart key was called the buried heart box. In the entire lost time space, only one person used this expensive luxury that made ordinary people flinch. That person was Su-su. My heart isn't here, so I won't love and won't hurt. Su-won still remembered that day when Su-su pointed at his heart and said this to her with a calm expression. No heart, so there won't be love. No heart, so there won't be pain. Su-won sighed and gently stroked her chest. Once upon a time, she thought that she no longer had a heart and had already forgotten how to love. This might be the difference between her and Su-su. He treated himself as a cold machine, even his heart could be sealed. Su-won couldn't be as ruthless as him from beginning to end. Lost Space, Time-Space Headquarters. When Yi Axian came out of the conference room, she saw the unforgettable figure. He stood straight in front of the window, the sunlight outside scattered on his shoulders. Between the light and shadow, his elegant and otherworldly appearance seemed to be plated with a faint glimmer. Department Head Su. Yi Axian hesitated but still went forward to greet Su-su. Su-su looked down at Yi Axian and smiled warmly. He was always so gentle and elegant, making people unable to see his true emotions. You're waiting for me. Yi Axian was actually a bit uncertain, but there was no one in the conference room now. Because she was newly appointed, she was left behind to say a few words. By the time she came out, the others had already left. Hearing Yi Axian's question, Su-su nodded lightly. This made Yi Axian a bit surprised, but then she thought of something. Do you have something to ask me about? Su-won. Su-su's eyes narrowed. How is she recently? Although it was just a simple question, Su-su seemed to have made up his mind. It had been a very, very long time since he had been so conflicted. This feeling seems to be conflicted. After abandoning the 7 emotions and 6 desires for too long, he felt more like a robot, unable to truly understand the feelings of a human. However, he still cared a little. Back then, the woman who had wanted to perish together with him. As expected, hearing Su-su's question, Yi Axian immediately narrowed her eyes and smiled. Su-won is doing very well. Recently, she has been working very hard. Maybe one day, she will surpass me. At that time, when she comes to the headquarters for a meeting, Department Head Su, you can personally ask about her recent situation. Although they were in the same spacetime, they didn't have any interaction because all the departments in the lost spacetime were separated. Seeing Su-won again, when Su-su heard Yi Axian's words, he smiled faintly as usual. Department Head Yi, don't belittle yourself. And I think it won't be long before she and I will soon meet again. Hearing Su-su's answer, Yi Axian was also stunned. Only then did she suddenly remember that the headquarters triennial cross-department test was about to begin. 3 years ago, Su-won hadn't come here yet. Now, as the second in command of the plane destroyer, in this year's cross-department test, Soo-won must attend, and Soo-soo will definitely appear. Time passes so quickly, it's time for the test again. Does department head Soo still have the confidence to win the championship again this year? In every cross-department test, each department would send 3 elite mission enforcers. Everyone would enter a mission world without a plot at the same time. At this time, everyone's golden fingers would be ineffective in this mission world. In the same world, there was no distinction between friend and foe, and it was difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. Killing between different departments was allowed. The entire test was divided into 2 time spaces, the preliminary selection and the finals. The preliminary selection had a time limit. Once the time limit was up, the people who were still alive would advance smoothly, and the finals time space was even more cruel, a race against time to kill. The one who survived to the end was the winner. Ever since Soo-soo became the number 1 of the plane repair department. After becoming the number 1, he had never lost. Over the years, almost all the participants of the plane destroyer headquarters had been killed by Soo-soo, including Yi Axeon herself. Thinking about it made her feel stifled. While Yi Axeon was feeling stifled, Soo-soo just smiled indifferently. I will do my best, you also have to work hard. As he spoke, he turned around and left without hesitation. Go all out to hell. Yi Axeon felt that it was necessary for her to immediately rush back to find Soo-won to discuss it and see if she could find a weakness of Soo-soo. Even the tiniest weakness was a good thing. She didn't believe that Soo-soo could really be like a precise machine and could be flawless. Unfortunately, in the end, Yi Axeon was still disappointed. Because when she returned to the plane destroyer headquarters, she was told that Soo-won had just entered the number 3 mission cabin to carry out a mission. Yi Axeon, who heard the news, sighed, but couldn't help but be curious. Could it be that Soo-won had feelings for the number 3 cabin? Why didn't she change the cabin? The actual situation was, Soo-won forgot to tell Soo-rui that she had been promoted, and the locator that Soo-rui bought could only rely on her mission cabin to track her whereabouts. So, you guys understand. At this time, in the mission world, Soo-won hadn't opened her eyes yet and felt hot all over. This feeling was. Soo-won abruptly opened her eyes and saw a row of carved agarwood chairs. At this time, she was sitting on the ground, her palace dress in a mess. Soo-won resisted the discomfort in her body and stood up with the help of a chair on the side. At this time, a humph sound suddenly came from behind her. Soo-won turned her head and saw a meatball-like man wearing a blue brocade robe lying on the ground at this time. His face was red and he was humming while tearing his clothes. Your mother. Soo-won's gaze turned cold and some vague memories flashed in her mind. She didn't dare to stay in this troublesome place and stumbled out. Pushing open the vermilion wooden door with great difficulty, Soo-won saw a secluded and long corridor. It was already the beginning of autumn, but the oncoming cold didn't make Soo-won's mind sober. The abnormally ferocious medicinal effect made her body even more restless and uneasy. In the distance, Soo-won already saw a group of vague shadows that seemed to be coming in her direction. There was no time to sort out the messy plot memory in her head. Soo-won decisively turned around and ran in the opposite direction. She didn't know how long she ran. When the consciousness in her mind gradually blurred, a calm surface of water finally appeared in Soo-won's line of sight. There was water, it was an artificial lake. Soo-won's eyes brightened. She quickly ran to the lake and almost jumped down without thinking. You don't want to live anymore. Suddenly, a familiar and anxious male voice came from behind. Soo-won's arm was firmly grabbed by someone. When she came back to her senses, her whole body was already locked in an ice-cold embrace. The cold air that hit her face made her instinctively feel very comfortable. Soo-won rubbed against his embrace and her hands unconsciously embraced the man's waist. Her somewhat upset heart finally calmed down, but that restless body became more and more unbridled. Su-won, I feel uncomfortable. I feel so uncomfortable. Su-won murmured and rubbed against Su-won's embrace again. Be good, it'll be okay in a while. I'll bring you away now. While speaking, Su-won had already wrapped Su-won's body with his cloak. Then, in a flash, his figure disappeared from the lakeside. In the early autumn night, the cold wind was already biting to the bone. Su-won was tightly held in Su-won's embrace, leaning against his cold chest, but she still felt unbearably hot. She involuntarily struggled a few times and her face unconsciously rubbed against Su-won's body. So hot. Don't move. Su-won's tone also sunk. He carried Su-won all the way over the high walls of Marquis Chinchuan-fu and finally landed in a small alley outside the Marquis-fu. In the dark alley, a luxurious carriage was parked. Guarding the carriage was a guard wearing a black outfit. Seeing Su-won's figure speeding over, that guard's face revealed a trace of shock. Master, you guard the entrance of the alley, don't let anyone come near here. Leaving behind these words, Su-won had already turned into a purple afterimage, carrying Su-won and leaping into the carriage. The inside of the carriage was very spacious. The low cushion inside was covered with a soft golden velvet blanket. Su-rui carefully placed Su-won on the soft cushion. Before he could get up, Su-won's hands had already tightly hooked around his neck. Don't go. Her fair and slender arms were soft and warm, making Su-rui's mind waver for a moment. Right now, Su-won's face was red and the long hair on her forehead was loose and stuck to her fair face because of her sweat. Under the dim candlelight, Su-won slightly raised her chin, her eyes were like water, her expression blurred as she looked at the man in front of her. In Su-rui's impression, Su-won had always been very indifferent, sometimes even very cold. He had never seen her so emotional and seductive, even if he knew that the person in front of him right now was not the real Su-won. But inside this body lived her soul. The person who was looking at him like this and telling him not to go was his Xiaowon. As long as he thought of this, Su-rui felt his lower abdomen heat up, as if there was a ball of fire burning in his body. His breathing involuntarily became disorderly, but thinking that Su-won was currently in an unconscious state, his remaining reason forced Su-rui to immediately calm down. Xiaowon, bear with it a bit, I'll help you. Woo! Su-rui originally wanted to say that he could help Su-won open up her acupuncture points and disperse the effects of the medicine in her body, but before he finished speaking, Su-won on the side had already come over in a daze and forcefully kissed Su-rui's lips. Su-won's consciousness had always been fuzzy. She felt that she was about to die from being burned. In the scorching sea of fire, she heard Su-rui say to her, I'll help you. Just like in that illusion in the last world, in the boundless flames, Su-rui extended his hand towards her. Su-won wanted to say that she didn't need anyone to help her, but, if that person was Su-rui, she didn't mind. Almost as soon as this thought welled up in her heart, Su-won's body had already reacted. She kissed Su-rui. Su-rui's lips were cold with a hint of sweetness, making Su-won feel very comfortable. Su-rui, Su-rui. Although her consciousness was fuzzy, Su-won still involuntarily called out Su-rui's name. Su-rui, kiss me. Do you know what you're doing? Su-rui's breathing quickened, but his gaze deepened, faintly looking at that face close at hand. No matter what she became, she was still his Xiaowon. In the sea of thousands of people, he could always see her at first glance and recognize her. What was she doing? Su-won somewhat didn't know what she was doing, but she somewhat uncomfortably twisted her body and continued to wrap around Su-rui's body. Su-rui, want me? If it's you, I'm willing. I'm truly willing, not making do or making do with a mistake. Just because the person in front of me is you, Su-rui. Some people said that the deepest feeling is companionship. Su Rui accompanied Su Wan through one world after another. No matter what she became, even if she was a sinister-looking zombie, he had never abandoned her. Love doesn't start, but it goes deep. Su Wan felt that the greatest fortune in her life was the Su Rui she met by chance in that world. Having this person, she would have no regrets in her life. Xiao Wan. Su Wan's words finally succeeded in defeating Su Rui's reason. Love is too deep, that's why he's so careful. And because love is too deep, he can sit calmly in front of anyone, but only towards her. Love, desire, deep affection.